Good evening and welcome to my channel Deep Sleep History. Tonight, there is no need to hurry anywhere. No battles wait outside your door, no castle gates need guarding, and no midnight watch calls your name. Instead, you are invited to travel gently across centuries, wandering through silent stone corridors where history and legend have lived side by side for hundreds of years. As always, settle into a comfortable position. Let your breathing become slow and steady. Imagine a cool evening breeze moving softly through ancient hills. Above you, stars shine over old towers that have watched countless generations pass beneath them. These castles once stood as symbols of strength. Massive walls protected kings, queens, soldiers, servants, and entire communities during uncertain times. Within their halls, joyful weddings were celebrated. Children laughed in courtyards, feasts filled enormous dining rooms, and musicians played beneath flickering candlelight. Yet, those same walls also witnessed sorrow. Wars arrived unexpectedly. Families were divided by politics. Noble houses rose and collapsed. Plagues swept across kingdoms. Prisoners disappeared into underground cells, while secret passages carried whispered conversations that were never meant to be heard. Stone remembers. Unlike wood, which slowly decays, or paper, which burns away, great castles often survive for centuries. Generation after generation walks through the same doorways, climbs the same staircases, and gazes from the same towers. Perhaps that is why people have always imagined these places holding echoes of the past. Across Europe, and even beyond, certain castles earned unusual reputations. Visitors claimed to hear footsteps when no one walked. Guards reported seeing distant figures dressed in clothing from long-forgotten centuries. Travelers described strange lights glowing behind abandoned windows. Others simply spoke of an unexplainable feeling that someone unseen was quietly watching. Whether these stories are true is something no historian can fully prove. Most likely, many have ordinary explanations.
Old buildings constantly shift. Thick stone expands and contracts with changing temperatures. Wind whistles through narrow arrow slits. Ancient wooden beams creak beneath their own tremendous age. Owls, ravens, and bats become invisible residents of forgotten towers. Even our own minds play curious tricks. When we enter a place already famous for ghost stories, every unexpected sound suddenly feels significant. A shadow becomes a figure, a breeze feels like a gentle touch, silence itself begins to seem mysterious. Psychologists call this expectation, historians call it folklore, storytellers simply call it a good tale. Tonight, we will enjoy these stories not because we expect to find proof of ghosts, but because they reveal something much deeper about the people who created them. Every haunted castle reflects real history. Behind every ghost is usually a forgotten war, a political betrayal, a tragic accident, a mysterious disappearance, or a family whose memories slowly transformed into legend over hundreds of years. Long before electricity illuminated every hallway, castles became completely different places after sunset. As daylight faded, enormous rooms disappeared into darkness. Candles illuminated only small circles of warm light, leaving endless shadows stretching across stone floors. Outside, forests surrounded many castles, alive with wolves, foxes, owls, and countless sounds that medieval people often could not explain. Imagine serving as a young guard during the year 1350. The moon hides behind thick clouds. Rain falls steadily against cold stone walls. Your only light comes from a small lantern whose flame struggles against the wind. Somewhere below, water drips endlessly inside ancient tunnels. Far above, ravens shift upon the rooftops. Every distant noise feels important.
Every moving shadow seems alive. Without modern science, many ordinary events naturally became extraordinary stories. A loose chain striking a wall, a forgotten tapestry moving in the breeze, mist drifting across a courtyard, footsteps echoing through empty corridors. These experiences slowly became family legends, then local traditions, and finally famous ghost stories passed from one generation to another. Many castles encourage such tales. Sometimes frightening legends discouraged thieves from entering abandoned buildings. Sometimes noble families embraced mysterious reputations because visitors found them fascinating. Local guides repeated dramatic stories, each generation adding another small detail until fiction and history became impossible to separate. Yet not every story was invented. Some castles truly experienced unimaginable suffering. Sieges lasting months left entire communities starving behind defensive walls. Political prisoners spent decades inside tiny stone rooms. During outbreaks of plague, castles transformed into isolated refuges filled with fear and uncertainty. The emotional weight of these places is real. When modern visitors quietly walk through ancient halls, they know countless lives unfolded there long before their own. Even without believing in ghosts, that awareness creates a profound sense of connection with history. This quiet, emotional atmosphere may explain much of what people describe as haunted. Over the course of tonight's journey, we will visit lonely towers standing high above mist-covered valleys, forgotten dungeons carved beneath medieval fortresses, elegant royal residences hiding tragic family secrets, and isolated castles where local villagers still share stories whispered for centuries. Some legends will be surprisingly gentle, others may seem chilling. But throughout our journey, we will remain peaceful observers, appreciating both the documented history and the folklore that has surrounded these remarkable buildings for generations. Our first destination will take us to northern England. There, near the border with Scotland, stands one of the world's most famous haunted castles, a fortress whose long history of warfare, imprisonment, and mystery has inspired stories for centuries. As the night grows quieter and our journey gently continues, we begin walking towards the ancient walls of Chillingham Castle, where history and legend have become almost impossible to separate.
The road grows quieter as we continue our gentle journey through history. Behind us, the modern world slowly fades away. Electric lights disappear one by one, replaced by the soft glow of stars above the northern countryside. Before us, rising from the rolling hills of Northumberland in northern England, stands an ancient fortress that has watched over the borderlands for more than 700 years. Its walls appear almost silver beneath the moonlight. This is Chillingham Castle. Long before it became famous for ghost stories, Chillingham was simply a castle built for survival. During the Middle Ages, England and Scotland were often locked in conflict. Borders shifted, armies marched across the countryside, villages were burned, rebuilt, and sometimes abandoned altogether. In such uncertain times, castles were not symbols of luxury alone, they were places where families hoped to remain alive. The thick stone walls surrounding Chillingham were designed to resist attack. Narrow windows allowed defenders to fire arrows while exposing very little of themselves. Heavy wooden gates reinforced with iron could withstand enormous force. Deep wells ensured fresh water during long sieges, while food was carefully stored inside secure rooms for difficult months ahead. Life within these walls was busy from sunrise until sunset. Blacksmiths repaired armor, stable boys cared for horses, servants swept endless corridors and prepared meals over roaring kitchen fires. Bakers worked before dawn, while cooks stirred enormous iron pots filled with soups and stews that fed everyone from noble guests to hard-working laborers. Above them all lived the lord of the castle and his family. Their private chambers were certainly more comfortable than those of ordinary servants, yet they were still cold by modern standards. Thick stone trapped winter's chill, fireplaces warmed only nearby rooms, candles provided limited light, and smoke from hundreds of burning torches often drifted through the great halls.
When evening arrived, daily life changed completely. Without electric lighting, darkness settled quickly over every tower, staircase, and courtyard. The gates were locked. The drawbridge, where one existed, was raised. Watchmen climbed to the battlements, carrying lanterns whose tiny flames barely pushed back the surrounding darkness. From their elevated positions, they watched forests stretching towards the horizon. Most nights passed peacefully. Others did not. The English-Scottish border during the medieval period was among the most dangerous regions in Britain. Raiding parties known as border reivers crossed the frontier unexpectedly, stealing livestock, supplies, and sometimes taking prisoners. Families often slept lightly, aware that danger could arrive before dawn. Imagine standing upon the castle wall during one of those nights.
The air is cool and damp. A gentle wind carries the scent of pine forests and wet earth. Far below, a river quietly reflects the moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls into the darkness. Moments later, another answers. The silence returns. Then, a horse neighs inside the stable. A loose chain gently taps against stone. Wood creaks somewhere deep within the castle. Each sound demands attention. Without modern streetlights or distant city noise, medieval nights felt remarkably alive. Many sounds travelled surprising distances. A traveller several fields away could be heard calling to companions. Branches rubbing together in strong winds created strange rhythms. Rainwater dripping into underground chambers echoed like distant footsteps. Today, we understand these natural causes quite easily, but centuries ago, explanations were not always obvious. People interpreted unfamiliar sounds through the beliefs of their own time. Religion shaped nearly every part of medieval life.
Most people believed that heaven, hell, angels, demons, miracles and spirits were genuine parts of everyday existence. Stories about supernatural encounters spread quickly because they fit comfortably within the worldview shared by nearly everyone. If someone reported seeing a mysterious figure walking along the battlements after midnight, neighbors rarely dismissed the story outright. Instead, they listened carefully. Who had died recently? Had someone been buried without proper rites? Was the castle cursed? Had God sent a warning? Questions like these naturally became part of everyday conversation. Over generations, stories grew richer. One witness described a shadow, another remembered glowing eyes, a third insisted the figure carried a lantern. Each retelling added another small detail until the legend became stronger than any single memory. This process happened throughout Europe. The longer a castle survived, the more stories gathered around it. Some were rooted in real historical tragedies. Others emerged from simple misunderstandings. Many blended both together so completely that separating fact from fiction became impossible. Chillingham Castle experienced enough genuine hardship to inspire countless tales. Throughout its long history, soldiers passed repeatedly through its gates. Military commanders planned campaigns here. Travelling nobles rested within its halls. Messengers carrying urgent news rode across the border in every season, bringing reports of battles, alliances, betrayals, and royal decisions. Every generation left its own mark upon the building. New towers were added, old walls repaired, rooms expanded, windows enlarged, fireplaces rebuilt. Yet beneath every improvement remained the older stones, preserving memories of centuries gone by. As time passed, England and Scotland gradually became more peaceful neighbours. The violent border conflicts slowly ended. Cannons replaced medieval siege weapons. Kings and queens ruled ever-changing political landscapes. The castle no longer needed constant military readiness. Instead, it became a grand country residence. Elegant furniture replaced some of the rough military furnishings. Beautiful tapestries decorated the walls. Gardens flourished beyond the defensive structures. Visitors now came not as soldiers but as distinguished guests. Yet despite these peaceful changes, old stories refused to disappear. Servants whispered about unusual sounds heard during quiet evenings. Guests occasionally mentioned unexplained footsteps echoing through empty corridors. Caretakers spoke of doors opening without obvious cause. Whether these events truly happened exactly as described is impossible to know. Human memory naturally reshapes experiences over time. A surprising event becomes slightly more dramatic with each retelling. A coincidence becomes a mystery becomes a legend. Eventually, the legend becomes inseparable from the place itself. This is perhaps the greatest magic of historic castles. Not supernatural magic, the magic of memory. Stone walls cannot speak, yet they encourage us to imagine everyone who once walked beside them. Every staircase invites questions. Who climbed these steps centuries ago? Every doorway suggests another forgotten conversation. Every empty chamber reminds us that laughter, arguments, celebrations, and sorrow once filled the silence. Ghost stories often grow strongest where history feels closest.
Even visitors who do not believe in spirits sometimes describe an overwhelming sense of presence, not because they expect ghosts, but because the weight of centuries becomes almost tangible. Standing inside a medieval castle is unlike standing inside any modern building. Time seems to slow. The outside world feels distant. The imagination quietly begins filling empty halls with people who lived long ago. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps we do not need ghosts to explain why ancient castles feel so extraordinary. History itself is powerful enough. Still, Chillingham Castle has one particular legend that has fascinated visitors for generations. Among all its whispered tales, one mysterious figure has become more famous than the rest.
As our quiet walk continues deeper into the ancient fortress, we approach the room where countless visitors have claimed to encounter the castle's most enduring legend. That story awaits us in the next chapter.
The great wooden door closes softly behind us. Outside, the wind continues its quiet journey across the northern hills of England, brushing gently against the weathered stones of Chillingham Castle. Inside, however, the air feels still. The thick medieval walls keep out much of the sound from the outside world, creating a silence so complete that even a single footstep seems to echo for several seconds. Our lantern casts a warm circle of light across the ancient floor. Beyond that light, the corridors disappear into darkness. For more than 7 centuries, countless people have walked these halls. Kings and queens, soldiers and servants, travelers and priests, children and elderly caretakers, all left their own small footprints upon the long story of this remarkable castle. Unlike many historic buildings, Chillingham has remained occupied for much of its history. Because people continued living here across so many generations, stories never truly faded away. Instead, they were passed from one household to another, growing richer with every telling. Among these stories, one became especially famous. Visitors began speaking of a young child. Not a frightening figure, not a violent spirit, simply a quiet little boy. According to local tradition, guests staying overnight sometimes reported hearing the soft cries of a child during the deepest hours of the night. The sound was said to come from somewhere within the thick stone walls themselves. Some claimed it lasted only a few moments. Others described hearing gentle sobbing followed by complete silence. Naturally, such reports invited curiosity. People searched the rooms. They examined hidden spaces behind fireplaces and beneath staircases. Centuries of renovations revealed forgotten passages, sealed doorways, and old chambers that had been hidden for generations. One discovery, made during restoration work in the 20th century, attracted particular attention. Workers uncovered skeletal remains concealed within part of the castle structure. Exactly how those remains came to rest there remains uncertain. Historical records from the medieval period are often incomplete, and many events simply were never written down. Yet once the discovery became known, local legends quickly connected it with the stories of the crying child. Whether there is any real connection is impossible to establish. History offers questions, folklore provides answers. The two do not always agree.
This pattern appears again and again in castles throughout Europe. A mysterious discovery inspires a story. The story attracts visitors. Visitors arrive expecting unusual experiences. Some genuinely believe they encounter something unexplained. Others notice perfectly ordinary sounds that suddenly seem extraordinary because they already know the legend. Modern psychologists describe this as the power of expectation. Imagine entering a silent castle after being told that footsteps are often heard along a certain corridor. Every small sound immediately captures your attention. Your mind begins searching for patterns. A floorboard settles. A distant door moves slightly in the breeze. Someone walking elsewhere in the building creates faint echoes. Under ordinary circumstances, these sounds would hardly be noticed. Inside a famous haunted castle, however, they become unforgettable. Expectation changes perception. Yet this explanation alone cannot fully account for the fascination people feel towards places like Chillingham. The castle possesses something deeper. Its atmosphere is shaped by genuine history. For hundreds of years, these walls witnessed moments of joy and moments of sorrow. Children were born here. Families celebrated weddings. Important political meetings determined the future of entire regions. But they also witnessed illness, loss, war, farewell. Every ancient building carries emotional weight because countless human lives unfolded within it. Visitors sense this history even without reading a single guidebook.
The stone itself tells a silent story. As we continue walking, our lantern reveals an enormous hall where fires once burned brightly every evening. Long wooden tables stretched from one end of the room to the other. Here, meals brought together everyone living within the castle. The lord occupied the highest seat. Honoured guests sat nearby. Soldiers, servants, craftsmen, and visitors filled the remaining benches according to strict customs that reflected medieval society. Imagine the sounds that once echoed beneath the high wooden ceiling. Laughter, conversation, the clatter of wooden plates, the crackling of enormous fireplaces, dogs resting beneath the tables,
musicians playing simple melodies while candles flickered against colourful tapestries. Now, only silence remains. Centuries have passed, the people are gone. Yet standing within the empty hall, it is remarkably easy to imagine life continuing just beyond the edge of the lantern's glow. This experience is not supernatural. It is human imagination responding naturally to history. Perhaps that is one reason haunted castles continue attracting visitors from around the world. They remind us that every historic building once belonged to real people. Unlike museums filled with carefully displayed objects, castles still preserve the spaces where everyday life unfolded. Bedrooms remain bedrooms, kitchens remain kitchens, staircases continue leading upwards exactly as they did hundreds of years ago. Walking through them becomes a quiet conversation with the past. Over time, Chillingham earned another unusual reputation. Some visitors claim to see figures dressed in old-fashioned clothing quietly crossing distant hallways before disappearing around corners. Others reported hearing footsteps climbing staircases that appeared completely empty. Caretakers occasionally mentioned doors found open after being carefully closed. Again, historians cannot confirm such accounts. They belong to oral tradition rather than documented fact.
The stone itself tells a silent story. As we continue walking, our lantern reveals an enormous hall, where fires once burned brightly every evening. Long wooden tables stretched from one end of the room to the other. Here, meals brought together everyone living within the castle. The lord occupied the highest seat. Honored guests sat nearby. Soldiers, servants, craftsmen, and visitors filled the remaining benches, according to strict customs that reflected medieval society. Imagine the sounds that once echoed beneath the high wooden ceiling. Laughter, conversation, the clatter of wooden plates, the crackling of enormous fireplaces, dogs resting beneath the tables, musicians playing simple melodies while candles flickered against colourful tapestries. Now, only silence remains. Centuries have passed. The people are gone. Yet standing within the empty hall, it is remarkably easy to imagine life continuing just beyond the edge of the lantern's glow. This experience is not supernatural. It is human imagination responding naturally to history. Perhaps that is one reason haunted castles continue attracting visitors from around the world. They remind us that every historic building once belonged to real people. Unlike museums filled with carefully displayed objects, castles still preserve the spaces where everyday life unfolded. Bedrooms remain bedrooms. Kitchens remain kitchens. Staircases continue leading upward exactly as they did hundreds of years ago. Walking through them becomes a quiet conversation with the past. Over time, Chillingham earned another unusual reputation. Some visitors claim to see figures dressed in old-fashioned clothing quietly crossing distant hallways before disappearing around corners. Others reported hearing footsteps climbing staircases that appeared completely empty. Caretakers occasionally mentioned doors found open after being carefully closed. Again, historians cannot confirm such accounts. They belong to oral tradition rather than documented fact.
Morning never seems to arrive in quite the same way across the Irish countryside. Even as the first light slowly touches the green hills, a soft mist often lingers over the fields, drifting lazily between ancient stone walls and quiet forests. Birds begin their songs long before the sun fully rises, while distant streams flow gently through valleys that have changed very little for centuries. It is here, in the heart of Ireland, that our journey brings us to another remarkable fortress. Standing quietly upon a rocky outcrop is Leap Castle, one of Ireland's oldest continuously occupied castles and, according to countless local stories, one of its most mysterious. Unlike Chillingham Castle, whose legends grew from centuries of border warfare, Leap Castle owes much of its reputation to the dramatic history of the family who once ruled here. The castle was built by the powerful O'Bannon clan before eventually coming under the control of the influential O'Carroll family during the late Middle Ages. In medieval Ireland, powerful families often governed their own territories, much like small kingdoms. Honour, loyalty, and family reputation were considered priceless. Unfortunately, rivalry could be equally powerful. Disagreements over land, leadership, and inheritance sometimes divided even close relatives. Many of these disputes lasted for generations.
History remembers the O'Carroll family as capable rulers, but also as participants in a period when political violence was far from unusual. Life in medieval Ireland was shaped by alliances that could change unexpectedly. Today's trusted friend might become tomorrow's rival. Castles therefore served not only as homes, but also as symbols of authority. Whoever controlled the castle often controlled the surrounding countryside. Within these walls, important decisions were made. Messengers arrived carrying news from neighboring clans, guests attended feasts celebrating new alliances, priests offered blessings before important gatherings. Children learned the traditions that would one day define their own responsibilities. From the outside, Leap Castle appeared strong and secure. Its thick walls overlooked rolling green landscapes stretching towards distant hills. The surrounding countryside was breathtakingly beautiful, yet inside, the atmosphere could become tense. Family disagreements sometimes reached tragic conclusions.
One particular story has survived for hundreds of years. Whether every detail is historically accurate remains uncertain, but the legend has become inseparable from the castle itself. According to tradition, two brothers of the O'Carroll family found themselves competing for leadership. One chose the life of a warrior. The other devoted himself to the church and became a priest. The priest regularly celebrated Mass inside a small chapel built within the castle. One day, while conducting a religious service before family members and attendants, tragedy struck. The warrior brother entered the chapel carrying a sword. Without warning, violence interrupted the sacred ceremony. The priest was killed before the altar. The shocked witnesses could scarcely believe what they had seen. Over time, local people began referring to the room as the Bloody Chapel. Whether every detail unfolded exactly as described is impossible to confirm. Medieval records are often incomplete, and oral traditions naturally evolve through generations. Yet historians agree that violent disputes among noble families were not uncommon during this period. Leadership often determined the survival of an entire clan. The stakes could be extraordinarily high. Today, visitors entering the small chapel often remark upon its remarkable stillness. Sunlight filters quietly through narrow windows. Stone walls reflect every whisper. The atmosphere encourages silence and reflection. It requires very little imagination to picture medieval worshippers gathered there hundreds of years ago. The power of such places comes not from ghost stories alone. It comes from understanding that real human lives unfolded within these spaces, real hopes, real fears, real choices.
As centuries passed, the Bloody Chapel became the center of countless supernatural legends. Some visitors claimed to feel an unusual heaviness while standing near the altar. Others reported sudden chills despite warm weather. A few believed they heard faint echoes of voices where no one else stood. Scientists would point toward perfectly ordinary explanations. Ancient stone buildings maintain unusual temperatures. Air moves unpredictably through hidden openings. Silence heightens awareness. Expectation shapes perception. These explanations are reasonable, yet the legends continue. Perhaps because they speak to something deeper than simple mystery. They remind us that acts of violence leave lasting impressions, not only upon history books, but upon collective memory. Every generation remembers tragedy in its own way. Some preserve it through written records, others through songs, others through stories whispered beside winter fires. Ghost legends often become another form of remembrance. They keep forgotten events alive long after names and dates begin to fade. Leap Castle contains another remarkable feature that has fascinated historians as much as storytellers. During restoration work in the early 20th century, workers uncovered a hidden chamber concealed beneath part of the castle. Inside, they discovered a deep pit. This was no ordinary storage room. The chamber had been carefully designed to trap anyone who fell inside. At the bottom lay numerous human remains. Archaeologists believe the chamber may have served as a prison or oubliette, a place where prisoners could be confined and, in many cases, left to die. This discovery shocked many people. It also gave fresh life to centuries-old ghost stories. Suddenly, legends that had long been dismissed as folklore seemed connected to a genuine historical discovery. Still, caution is important. Finding an ancient prison does not prove supernatural claims. It simply reminds us that medieval life could be extraordinarily harsh. Justice during that era often looked very different from modern legal systems. Castles were not only homes, they were centers of political power. Punishments could be severe.
Prisoners sometimes vanished into underground chambers without leaving detailed historical records behind. As evening slowly approaches once more, we climb the castle's highest tower. From here, Ireland stretches peacefully in every direction. Green fields, quiet farms,
Ancient trees swaying gently in the breeze. Nothing about the landscape suggests fear. Instead, it offers calm. Perhaps that contrast explains why Leap Castle feels so unforgettable. Its surroundings are peaceful. Its history is complicated. Beauty and tragedy exist side by side. The same could be said of many historic castles throughout Europe. The buildings themselves are magnificent achievements of medieval engineering. Yet behind every elegant tower lies a human story filled with ambition, loyalty, love, loss, and sometimes betrayal. Those stories, not ghosts, are what truly haunt these places. As darkness gently settles over the Irish hills, the castle grows quiet once again. The wind moves softly through narrow windows. Owls begin their nightly calls. The ancient stones remain exactly where they have stood for centuries, patiently watching another day come to its end. Our own journey, however, must continue. Across the sea, high above Scotland's capital city, another fortress waits upon a volcanic rock, a castle where battles, sieges, royal intrigue, and centuries of whispered legends have created one of Britain's most enduring haunted reputations.
Our journey now carries us north once again, across the restless waters of the Irish Sea and into the rugged landscapes of Scotland. As the morning mist slowly lifts, a great rocky hill rises above the city of Edinburgh. Upon its summit stands one of the most recognizable castles in the world. For nearly 1,000 years, Edinburgh Castle has watched over Scotland's capital. Unlike many castles hidden among forests or quiet countryside, this fortress dominates the skyline. Every road leading into the old city seems to point towards its towering walls, reminding visitors that this was once the heart of an independent kingdom. Today, thousands of travelers climb the ancient pathways each day. They admire the breathtaking views, they photograph the stone towers, they explore museums filled with crowns, swords, uniforms, and centuries of Scottish history. Yet when evening arrives and the crowds disappear, the castle becomes something entirely different. The laughter fades, the gates close, only a handful of caretakers remain inside the vast fortress. Long shadows stretch across empty courtyards, while cool winds sweep across the volcanic rock beneath the castle's foundations. It is during these quiet hours that many of Edinburgh Castle's oldest legends seem to awaken. Unlike stories built around a single mysterious event, the legends here grew from nearly 1,000 years of continuous history. Few places in Britain have witnessed so many dramatic moments. Kings were crowned here, queens gave birth within these walls, armies surrounded the fortress during long and desperate sieges. Political prisoners spent years confined inside dark stone chambers. Every century added another chapter, every generation left another memory. To understand why Edinburgh Castle earned its haunted reputation, we must first understand what daily life here once looked like.
Imagine the castle during the 15th century. The fortress is alive with activity. Blacksmiths hammer glowing iron inside smoky workshops. Stable hands brush powerful war horses before sunrise. Archers practice along the outer walls. Messengers ride through the gates carrying sealed letters from distant towns. In the kitchens, enormous fires burn continuously. Fresh bread fills the air with its comforting scent. Cooks prepare meals for nobles, soldiers, servants, and honored guests. The great hall echoes with conversation from dawn until late evening. Musicians entertain during royal feasts. Children chase one another through safe corners of the courtyard, while guards patrol the walls above. Yet beneath this lively surface lies constant uncertainty. Scotland's history was shaped by conflict. Wars with neighbouring kingdoms, struggles over royal succession, and political rivalries repeatedly placed Edinburgh Castle at the centre of national events. During times of siege, life changed dramatically. The gates remained firmly shut. Supplies became precious. Water was carefully rationed.
Food stores slowly diminished as weeks stretched into months. Families waited anxiously for news from beyond the walls.
No one knew whether help would arrive or whether the enemy would succeed. The emotional strain was immense. Centuries later, visitors walking through the fortress often remark that some rooms feel strangely solemn, not frightening, simply heavy with history. This feeling is understandable. The castle has witnessed extraordinary moments of triumph and heartbreaking moments of loss. One of the oldest legends concerns a lone piper. According to Scottish tradition, centuries ago, hidden tunnels were believed to run beneath the castle and the streets of Edinburgh. To explore these underground passages safely, a young bagpiper volunteered. His task seemed simple. As he walked through the tunnels, he would continue playing his pipes. People above ground would follow the sound, allowing them to map the underground route. At first, the music echoed clearly beneath the streets. The cheerful melody drifted through the earth, reassuring everyone listening above. Then, without warning, the music stopped. Searchers immediately entered the tunnels. They called his name. They carried lanterns into every passage they could find. But the young piper was never discovered. Neither he nor his instrument was ever found. Since then, generations have claimed that on rare occasions, the faint sound of distant bagpipes can still be heard beneath Edinburgh Castle. Historians cannot verify the story. No contemporary records confirm that such an expedition truly occurred. It belongs to Scottish folklore rather than documented history. Yet the tale remains beloved because it captures something timeless. It reminds us of humanity's endless curiosity. People have always ventured into the unknown. Sometimes they returned.
Sometimes they did not. The story also reflects another truth. Castles often hide secrets. Over centuries, renovations sealed doorways. New walls covered older rooms. Passages were abandoned. Entire sections disappeared beneath later construction. Even modern archaeologists continue making surprising discoveries beneath historic buildings. Another famous legend speaks of a headless drummer. According to local tradition, whenever great danger threatened Scotland, a mysterious drummer appeared upon the castle walls. His silent warnings supposedly announced difficult times ahead. Such stories were common throughout medieval Europe. Musical signals played an important role during war: trumpets, drums, bells. Their sounds communicated danger long before written messages could travel quickly. Over time, these practical military traditions gradually transformed into supernatural legends. As afternoon fades into evening, we quietly enter the castle's old prison vaults. The atmosphere changes immediately. The ceilings are lower, the air becomes cooler. Heavy wooden doors reinforced with iron line the narrow passages. These chambers once held prisoners captured during various wars. Some were sailors, others were soldiers.
A few were political prisoners whose loyalty had placed them on the losing side of history. Many spent months or even years inside these confined spaces. Despite the hardships they endured, historical records reveal moments of remarkable humanity. Some prisoners carved intricate decorations into wooden objects. Others built small model ships using scraps of material. These delicate creations survive today, offering quiet reminders that hope often endures even in difficult circumstances. Walking through these rooms today, visitors sometimes describe hearing unexplained knocks or distant footsteps. Engineers offer practical explanations. Old stone buildings constantly shift with changes in temperature and humidity. Echoes travel unpredictably through underground chambers. Water moving beneath ancient foundations creates subtle sounds that seem difficult to locate. Still, the stories continue. Not because people reject science, but because folklore gives emotional meaning to places where history alone can sometimes feel overwhelming. Ghost stories become another language for remembering the past. As darkness settles over Edinburgh, the city below begins to sparkle with thousands of modern lights. Cars move quietly along streets where horses once carried armored knights. Electric lamps illuminate buildings that medieval citizens could never have imagined. Yet high above the city, the castle remains much as it has for centuries. Its ancient stones glow softly beneath the moon. The wind brushes gently against the battlements. History and the present exist side by side. Standing here, it becomes easy to understand why Edinburgh Castle has inspired so many legends. Not because ghosts have been proven to walk these halls, but because the weight of nearly 1,000 years invites the imagination to wander. Every stone has witnessed a story. Every tower has watched generations come and go, and every visitor leaves carrying a small piece of that history away with them. As our peaceful journey continues, we now prepare to travel further east, toward a castle unlike any other in Europe. Hidden among the forests of the Czech countryside stands a fortress built in an unusual location, not to defend a kingdom from invading armies, according to legend, but to...
As we leave the rugged hills of Scotland behind, our journey carries us across the European continent to the peaceful forests of northern Bohemia in what is now the Czech Republic. The landscape changes gently. Rolling green hills replace dramatic cliffs. Dense pine forests stretch across the countryside, their branches swaying softly in the evening breeze. Small villages appear between the trees, where church bells have marked the passing of the hours for centuries. Hidden deep within this quiet landscape stands one of Europe's most unusual medieval fortresses. It is called Hauska Castle. At first glance, Hauska seems like any other castle from the 13th century. Its thick stone walls rise above a wooden hillside. A central courtyard sits peacefully within its defences. Tall windows overlook the surrounding countryside, while red-tiled roofs glow warmly beneath the afternoon sun. Yet historians have long noticed something rather curious. Unlike most castles of its time, Hauska was not built to guard an important trade route. It does not overlook a busy river crossing. It protects no major town. There are no nearby mines or strategic mountain passes. In fact, when construction began during the reign of King Ottokar II in the late 1200s, the surrounding area was sparsely populated. Why then build such an impressive fortress here? This simple question eventually gave birth to one of Europe's most fascinating legends. According to local folklore, Hauska Castle was built not to keep enemies out, but to keep something in. The legend tells of a great opening in the earth beneath the castle. People believed it was a bottomless pit leading directly into the underworld. According to the story, strange sounds emerged from its depths. Unusual creatures were said to climb from the darkness after sunset. Villagers avoided the area completely. Even hunters refused to enter the surrounding forest. Whether anyone truly believed every detail is impossible to know. Medieval Europe was a world filled with religious symbolism. Unknown places were often explained through spiritual beliefs rather than scientific understanding.
A deep cave might become a gateway to another world. An unexplained sound could be interpreted as a supernatural warning. Fog drifting across the hills transformed ordinary landscapes into mysterious places. The natural world inspired both wonder and imagination. As centuries passed, the story of the pit grew even more dramatic. One popular version tells of a prisoner who was offered freedom if he agreed to be lowered into the opening on a rope. The guards carefully lowered him into the darkness. For a few moments, everything remained quiet. Then, terrified screams echoed upward. The soldiers immediately pulled the rope back. When the prisoner emerged, he appeared completely transformed. According to the legend, his hair had turned white and his face looked decades older than before. He begged never to be lowered into the pit again. It is, of course, only a legend. No medieval documents confirm such an event. Historians regard it as folklore rather than historical fact. Still, stories like this reveal something important about the people who created them. Deep caves have always inspired mystery. Long before modern geology explained underground formations, people naturally wondered what lay beneath the earth. Darkness concealed the unknown, and the unknown often became the home of myths. Today, archaeologists believe the so-called bottomless pit was almost certainly a natural rock formation or deep fissure in the limestone beneath the castle. While impressive, it was never an entrance to another world. Yet the legend survived because it answered a question that history could not. Why build a castle in such an isolated place?
Walking through Hauska Castle today, visitors notice another unusual feature. Many windows appear to face inward toward the courtyard rather than outward across the surrounding landscape. The defensive design seems incomplete compared with other castles from the same era. Again, historians offer practical explanations. The castle likely served multiple purposes, including administration, hunting, and the management of royal lands. It may never have been intended to withstand major military sieges. But practical explanations rarely erase good stories.
Instead, history and folklore exist comfortably side by side. As evening approaches, we quietly step inside the castle chapel. The room is modest yet beautiful. Stone arches curve gracefully overhead. Faded medieval frescoes still decorate portions of the walls. Sunlight filters softly through narrow windows, creating gentle patterns across the ancient floor. For centuries, people have gathered here for prayer, reflection, and moments of peace. Interestingly, some legends claim the chapel was deliberately built directly above the mysterious pit. According to folklore, sacred ground would forever seal whatever darkness lay beneath. There is no archaeological evidence supporting this idea. Nevertheless, it remains one of the castle's most enduring stories, perhaps because it reflects a timeless human desire. When confronted with uncertainty, people often seek comfort through symbols of hope. Throughout history, sacred spaces have offered reassurance during difficult times. Whether facing war, illness, famine, or unexplained natural events, communities gathered together believing that faith could overcome fear. The chapel at Hauska represents that enduring hope. As twilight slowly settles over the forest, the castle grows wonderfully quiet. Birdsong fades.
The wind rustles gently through tall pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, a deer moves carefully between the shadows. Nothing disturbs the peaceful evening. And yet, if you stand very still within these ancient walls, it is easy to understand why generations imagined extraordinary stories here. Isolation has a powerful effect upon the imagination. Far from busy cities, surrounded by endless forest, silence becomes almost tangible. Every creaking beam, every fluttering bird, every whisper of wind through narrow windows seems larger than life. Modern visitors sometimes report feeling an unusual atmosphere inside Hauska Castle. Most describe it not as frightening, but deeply mysterious. Psychologists would explain this as a perfectly natural response. Our brains are remarkably sensitive to unfamiliar environments. Ancient architecture, dim lighting, and complete silence encourage heightened awareness. We notice details that would normally escape our attention. The result feels extraordinary, even when every sound has an ordinary cause. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of Hauska Castle. Mystery does not require the supernatural. History, architecture, nature, and human imagination together create experiences that feel unforgettable. Sometimes the most remarkable stories tell us less about ghosts and much more about ourselves. Night has now fully arrived. The stars appear one by one above the dark Bohemian forest. The castle stands quietly beneath them, unchanged through the centuries. Its legends continue to welcome curious travelers from around the world, inviting each visitor to decide for themselves where history ends and imagination begins. Our peaceful journey, however, must continue. Soon we will travel southeast, across the Carpathian Mountains, to perhaps the most famous castle associated with legends of darkness, a fortress forever linked with vampires, medieval rulers, and one of history's most misunderstood noblemen.
The forests of Bohemia slowly disappear behind us as our quiet journey continues towards the towering Carpathian Mountains. The landscape becomes wilder. Rolling hills rise into steep mountain slopes covered with ancient beech and pine forests. Narrow rivers wind through deep valleys, while small villages rest peacefully beneath towering peaks. During autumn, golden leaves blanket the hillsides. In winter, fresh snow transforms the entire region into a silent world of white. High above one of these valleys stands Bran Castle. Its pale stone walls rise dramatically from a rocky cliff, while pointed towers reach towards the sky. Even from a great distance, the fortress appears almost dreamlike, especially when morning mist drifts through the surrounding forest. Few castles anywhere in the world have inspired as much mystery. Ask someone to name a haunted castle, and Bran Castle often comes to mind immediately. Yet its true history is quite different from its popular reputation. The castle was built in the late 14th century by the people of Brasov, an important trading city in medieval Transylvania. Its purpose was practical. Bran Castle guarded one of the busiest mountain passes connecting Transylvania with the regions to the south.
Merchants carrying salt, cloth, spices, wine, and precious metals regularly crossed these mountains. The castle protected travelers, collected customs duties, and watched for potential invaders. Every day, caravans approached its gates. Horse-drawn wagons climbed the steep road. Guards inspected goods entering the region. Messengers carried royal orders through the mountain pass. Life here revolved around trade as much as defense. Unlike isolated castles hidden deep within forests, Bran was constantly connected to the wider world. Travelers from many different cultures passed beneath its towers. With them came stories. Some were true, others became larger with every retelling.
Over centuries, Bran Castle slowly became surrounded by folklore. But one legend would eventually overshadow all the others: the legend of Dracula. To understand how this happened, we must first meet a real historical figure. His name was Vlad III, Original Kingdoms, and the expanding Ottoman Empire. Vlad was known as a determined military leader. He fought fiercely to defend his lands during an exceptionally violent period of European history. Unfortunately, he also became famous for using brutal punishments against his enemies. Such practices were horrifying by modern standards. Even during his own lifetime, stories about his cruelty spread rapidly across Europe. Some accounts exaggerated his actions, others mixed fact with rumor. Printed pamphlets, still a relatively new technology at the time, carried sensational tales from one country to another. Over the centuries, the historical man gradually became surrounded by legend. Then, in 1897, the Irish writer Bram Stoker published his famous novel Dracula. Curiously, there is no strong historical evidence that Stoker ever visited Bran Castle, nor is there convincing evidence that Vlad the Impaler lived there for any significant length of time. Yet Bran Castle's dramatic appearance matched the public imagination perfectly. Its towers, its narrow staircases, its mountain setting, its lonely silhouette against the evening sky. Everything looked exactly as readers imagined the home of Count Dracula should appear. Slowly, popular culture connected them forever. Today, millions of visitors arrive expecting a vampire's castle. Instead, they discover something far more interesting, a real medieval fortress filled with authentic history.
As we quietly enter the castle, sunlight filters through narrow Gothic windows. Unlike many dark legends surrounding Bran, the interior feels surprisingly warm. Wooden staircases connect cozy rooms. Fireplaces once warmed noble families during long mountain winters. Colorful woven carpets decorate the floors. Simple wooden furniture reflects centuries of practical living rather than theatrical mystery. Imagine life here during the 15th century. Outside, merchants approach the gates after a long journey through the mountains. Inside, cooks prepare hot meals. Stable workers care for tired horses. Blacksmiths repair damaged wagon wheels. Officials carefully record taxes collected from passing traders. Children of noble families receive lessons in reading, writing, and religion. Daily life continues, much as it would in any busy medieval stronghold. Yet after sunset, everything changes. The mountain forests become incredibly quiet. Mist gathers among the trees. Wolves occasionally howl from distant valleys. Their voices echo through the mountains, creating sounds unlike anything heard in busy cities. Travelers unfamiliar with the wilderness often found these nights deeply unsettling. Without electric lights, the darkness felt complete. The forest seemed endless. Every rustling branch invited another story. It required very little imagination for supernatural legends to flourish in such surroundings. One local tradition speaks of mysterious lights occasionally appearing among the forests below the castle. Modern science offers several possible explanations: moonlight reflecting through drifting mist,
natural gases igniting briefly above marshy ground, or perhaps nothing more unusual than lanterns carried by late-night travelers. Centuries ago, however, such lights were often interpreted as spirits wandering through the mountains. These beliefs existed long before Dracula entered popular culture. Romanian folklore is rich with tales of enchanted forests, protective spirits, mysterious creatures, and restless souls. Like every culture, medieval Romania developed stories that helped explain the unknown. Those traditions deserve appreciation in their own right, independent of later vampire fiction. As we climb one of Bran Castle's highest towers, the view is breathtaking. The Carpathian Mountains stretch endlessly towards the horizon. Dense forests ripple like green waves beneath the evening breeze. Tiny villages rest peacefully in distant valleys. Clouds cast moving shadows across the landscape. Standing here, it becomes easy to understand why storytellers found inspiration. Nature itself feels timeless. The mountains have changed little since the Middle Ages. Generations of travelers have looked upon this same view. Some came seeking trade, others sought safety. Many simply hoped to survive another difficult winter. History leaves powerful echoes, not supernatural echoes, human echoes. Every stone beneath our feet was placed by skilled craftsmen centuries ago. Every staircase bears the marks of countless footsteps. Every doorway reminds us that real families once laughed, argued, celebrated, and mourned within these walls. That quiet awareness often creates the atmosphere people describe as haunting. As darkness gently settles over Bran Castle, lanterns glow softly inside its ancient rooms. Outside, the forest grows still once again. The famous vampire legends remain part of the castle's modern identity, attracting curious visitors from every corner of the world. But beyond the fiction stands something equally fascinating. A genuine medieval fortress, a witness to centuries of European history, a place where fact and folklore have become beautifully intertwined. Our peaceful journey now turns northwest once more. Across the highlands of Scotland, another magnificent castle awaits us, one filled with royal secrets, family legends, and the mysterious tale of a hidden nobleman whose story has puzzled historians for generations.
The Carpathian Mountains gradually fade into the distance as our journey carries us back across Europe, returning once more to the quiet beauty of Scotland. Morning arrives gently over the rolling countryside of Angus. Golden sunlight filters through ancient oak trees. A thin layer of mist floats peacefully above quiet fields where deer graze without concern. Small streams wind across the landscape, reflecting the pale blue sky, while distant church bells softly announce the beginning of another day. Standing at the end of a long tree-lined avenue is one of Scotland's most beautiful castles, Glamis Castle. Unlike the rugged military fortresses we have visited before, Glamis appears almost magical. Its elegant towers rise gracefully above carefully maintained gardens. Ornate chimneys decorate the rooftops. Dozens of tall windows catch the sunlight, giving the castle a warm and welcoming appearance. It seems more like the setting of a fairy tale than the home of ghost stories. Yet appearances can be wonderfully misleading. Behind its graceful architecture lies nearly 700 years of remarkable history, filled with royal visitors, political intrigue, family secrets, and legends that continue to fascinate historians and storytellers alike. Glamis Castle has long been associated with Scottish royalty. For centuries, noble families gathered here for celebrations, hunting expeditions, and important political meetings. Most famously, it was the childhood home of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, whose daughter would later become Queen Elizabeth II. Because of these royal connections, Glamis occupies a unique place within British history. But its legends reach back much further. Long before modern visitors admired its elegant gardens, medieval residents whispered about unusual events hidden deep within the castle. One of the oldest stories concerns a mysterious chamber. According to tradition, somewhere inside Glamis exists a secret room. No visitor knows its exact location, no official guide identifies it.
Over centuries, Bran Castle slowly became surrounded by folklore. But one legend would eventually overshadow all the others. The legend of Dracula. To understand how this happened, we must first meet a real historical figure. His name was Vlad III, Original Kingdoms, and the expanding Ottoman Empire. Vlad was known as a determined military leader. He fought fiercely to defend his lands during an exceptionally violent period of European history. Unfortunately, he also became famous for using brutal punishments against his enemies. Such practices were horrifying by modern standards,
Even during his own lifetime, stories about his cruelty spread rapidly across Europe. Some accounts exaggerated his actions, others mixed fact with rumor. Printed pamphlets, still a relatively new technology at the time, carried sensational tales from one country to another. Over the centuries, the historical man gradually became surrounded by legend. Then, in 1897, the Irish writer Bram Stoker published his famous novel Dracula. Curiously, there is no strong historical evidence that Stoker ever visited Bran Castle, nor is there convincing evidence that Vlad the Impaler lived there for any significant length of time. Yet Bran Castle's dramatic appearance matched the public imagination perfectly. Its towers, its narrow staircases, its mountain setting, its lonely silhouette against the evening sky. Everything looked exactly as readers imagined the home of Count Dracula should appear. Slowly, popular culture connected them forever. Today, millions of visitors arrive expecting a vampire's castle. Instead, they discover something far more interesting, a real medieval fortress filled with authentic history.
The gardens become still. Long corridors stretch into gentle darkness. Old wooden floors creak softly beneath changing temperatures. Every sound seems amplified by the remarkable silence. Imagine serving here during the 17th century. The household has finally gone to bed. Only a few servants remain awake, checking fireplaces before retiring for the night. A candle flickers gently as you carry it through the hallway. The flame dances whenever a cool draft slips beneath an ancient doorway. Far away, a grandfather clock quietly marks another passing hour. Then, a floorboard settles. A distant door gently shifts within its frame. Perhaps only the castle adjusting naturally after another long day. Or perhaps something else. Without modern scientific knowledge, even ordinary sounds could easily become extraordinary stories. Over generations, those stories accumulated. One legend speaks of a mysterious lady dressed in grey who quietly walks through certain rooms before disappearing without a trace. Unlike many frightening ghost tales, the Grey Lady is usually described as calm and peaceful. Visitors who claim to have seen her often report feeling curiosity rather than fear. Who might she represent? No one knows with certainty. Some suggest she symbolizes one of the many noblewomen who once lived within the castle. Others believe she reflects the collective memory of generations who called Glamis home. Whether the legend began with one unusual experience or slowly developed over centuries remains impossible to determine. Ghost stories rarely have clear beginnings. Instead, they evolve naturally as each generation contributes another small detail. One caretaker remembers hearing footsteps. Another recalls seeing an unfamiliar figure. A visitor notices an unexpected shadow.
Years later, these separate memories combine into a single enduring tradition. Folklore grows quietly, much like an old tree. Its roots become impossible to separate from the landscape itself. Another famous story concerns the Earl Beardy, a legendary nobleman said to have loved card games above all else. According to the tale, one stormy Sunday evening he searched desperately for someone willing to play cards with him. Because Sunday was considered a sacred day of rest, everyone refused. Frustrated, the Earl supposedly declared that he would play with anyone, even the devil himself. Moments later, a mysterious stranger appeared. The two disappeared into a private room, where they continued their endless game. Some versions claim that strange sounds can still occasionally be heard from behind a locked door. Historians classified this story as folklore rather than historical fact. Similar legends appear throughout Europe. Warnings against pride, greed, and reckless behavior often took the form of memorable ghost stories. They entertained listeners while quietly teaching moral lessons. Whether anyone truly believed every detail mattered less than the values the stories encouraged. As night settles fully over Glamis, we step outside into the gardens. The castle glows softly beneath the moonlight. Its elegant towers reflect in a quiet pond nearby. An owl calls from the branches of an ancient oak. The breeze carries the delicate scent of flowers through the cool evening air. Nothing feels threatening. Instead, the castle invites quiet reflection. Perhaps that is Glamis Castle's greatest mystery. It reminds us that beauty and mystery often exist together. Not every haunted place must appear dark or frightening. Sometimes the most peaceful locations preserve the deepest stories. As we pause for one final look, the windows shine warmly against the Scottish night.
Behind them lie centuries of laughter, celebration, sorrow, and quiet family life. History remains alive here, not because ghosts have been proven to walk the halls, but because memory continues to linger within every ancient stone. Our journey now leads us across the English Channel to France, where another magnificent castle waits beside a peaceful river. Its elegant towers hide one of Europe's most famous ghost legends, a noblewoman whose green dress has become as legendary as the castle itself.
Our peaceful journey now leaves the cool highlands of Scotland behind and crosses the English Channel into the gentle countryside of western France. The landscape changes once again. Wide rivers wind lazily through fertile valleys. Endless vineyards stretch across rolling hills, producing grapes that have been carefully tended for centuries. Quiet villages with stone cottages rest beneath church steeples, while rows of tall poplar trees sway gently in the afternoon breeze. This is the Loire Valley, often called the Garden of France. Among its many elegant castles stands one unlike any we have visited before, Château de Brissac. Unlike the rugged border fortresses of Britain or the isolated mountain castles of Romania, Brissac feels almost like a royal palace. Its graceful facade rises 7 stories into the sky, making it the tallest chateau in France. Large windows flood its grand rooms with sunlight. Beautiful gardens surround the estate. Ornate staircases, crystal chandeliers, richly decorated ceilings, and elegant salons speak not of endless warfare, but of refinement, music, and noble life. Yet beneath this beauty lies one of France's oldest and most enduring ghost legends, a story that has survived for more than 500 years. Like many castle legends, it begins not with monsters or mysterious creatures, but with ordinary human emotions: love, jealousy, betrayal, and heartbreak. To understand the legend, we must travel back to the late 15th century. France was slowly recovering from generations of conflict. Noble families once again filled their estates with music, celebrations, and elaborate banquets. Life within great chateaux reflected wealth and influence.
Guests arrived in elegant carriages. Servants prepared magnificent meals. Musicians entertained noble families late into the evening. Behind the polished appearance, however, family relationships were often complicated. Political marriages were common. Personal happiness sometimes came second to family alliances and social expectations. According to tradition, one young noblewoman became forever linked to Brissac Castle. Her name was Charlotte de Brézé. Charlotte belonged to one of France's most respected noble families. She married Jacques de Brézé, a powerful aristocrat known for his skill as a hunter. At first, their marriage appeared successful. They lived within beautiful surroundings. They possessed wealth, influence, and every comfort available during their age. Yet appearances can sometimes hide difficult realities. According to historical accounts, Jacques eventually became convinced that Charlotte had entered into a secret relationship with another nobleman. Exactly what happened remains uncertain. Like many events from the 15th century, surviving records provide only fragments of the full story. Still, one tragic night changed everything. Jacques reportedly discovered the two together. Consumed by anger, he confronted them. The encounter ended in violence. Both Charlotte and her companion lost their lives within the chateau. Whether every detail unfolded exactly as later generations described is impossible to know. Historians continue debating aspects of the story, but the tragedy itself became firmly rooted in French history. As decades passed, local people began telling a remarkable tale. They claimed Charlotte never truly left the castle. Instead, she continued quietly wandering its grand halls. Visitors described seeing a pale woman wearing a flowing green gown. Some reported glimpsing her near staircases. Others believed she appeared beside long gallery windows overlooking the gardens. Because of her elegant clothing, she eventually became known as the Green Lady. Unlike many frightening ghost stories, Charlotte's legend carries an unmistakable feeling of sadness. She is rarely described as threatening. Instead, she appears as a lonely figure, forever connected to the place where her life ended. Perhaps that explains why her story has endured for centuries. It reflects a universal human truth. Loss leaves lasting memories. Historic buildings often become silent guardians of those memories. As we quietly enter Brissac today, afternoon sunlight fills the enormous entrance hall. Elegant portraits line the walls. Each painting preserves the face of someone who once called this remarkable chateau home. Generations of noble families looked upon these same portraits while climbing the grand staircase. Children grew into adults beneath these ceilings. Musicians performed concerts in beautifully decorated salons. Guests danced during magnificent celebrations illuminated by hundreds of candles. The chateau witnessed far more happiness than tragedy, yet one sorrowful event became its most famous story. Such is often the nature of memory. Joy is quietly lived, tragedy is frequently remembered. As evening approaches, we wander through the chateau's magnificent ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hang high above polished wooden floors. Massive fireplaces once warmed guests during winter gatherings. Tall mirrors reflect fading golden light from the setting sun. Imagine this room alive during the 18th century. Violins fill the air with graceful melodies. Couples move elegantly across the floor. Laughter echoes beneath painted ceilings. Outside, carriages continue arriving along the tree-lined avenue. The chateau glows warmly against the French evening. Now, the ballroom rests in peaceful silence.
Only our footsteps accompany us. Every empty room invites the imagination to reconstruct the lives once lived here. That quiet exercise of imagination often creates what people describe as a haunted atmosphere. Not fear, presence, a sense that history remains close enough to touch. Some modern visitors claim they occasionally smell old perfume while walking through certain corridors. Others report hearing faint footsteps in otherwise empty rooms. Building specialists point toward practical possibilities. Historic houses constantly breathe. Air circulates through hidden spaces. Old wooden floors expand and contract. Scents from ancient materials sometimes emerge unexpectedly as humidity changes. These explanations are entirely reasonable, yet they do little to diminish the emotional power of the stories. Ghost legends survive because they preserve something beyond facts alone. They preserve feeling. The Green Lady reminds visitors not simply of a historical event, but of the emotional consequences of jealousy, anger, and irreversible choices. Every generation understands those emotions. That is why the story continues to resonate. As darkness settles across the Loire Valley, the chateau's elegant windows glow softly beneath the moon. The surrounding gardens fall wonderfully quiet. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves of centuries-old trees. Somewhere nearby, an owl begins its nightly call. The chateau appears almost exactly as it might have centuries ago. Peaceful, beautiful, timeless. Standing here, it becomes easy to appreciate why France's grand castles inspire not only admiration, but also imagination. History does not always survive through official documents alone. Sometimes it survives through stories quietly passed from grandparents to grandchildren, from local guides to curious travelers, from one generation to the next. Whether or not anyone has truly seen the Green Lady matters less than the enduring memory her legend represents. She has become part of Brissac itself, a symbol of the chateau's remarkable past. As our peaceful journey continues, we now prepare to leave Europe for the first time. Far to the south, on the shores of Table Bay, another great fortress awaits. Its history is shaped not by medieval kings, but by sailors, merchants, colonial settlements, and centuries of life at the meeting point of two great oceans.
For the first time on our journey, we leave the ancient castles of Europe behind. Our path follows the sea routes once sailed by merchants, explorers, and great trading fleets. We drift south across the Atlantic Ocean, where powerful currents meet beneath endless skies. Weeks pass in the imagination, just as they once did for sailors crossing these waters in wooden ships driven only by wind and determination. Eventually, a magnificent mountain appears on the horizon. Its broad, flat summit rises above the coastline like a giant stone table. This is Table Mountain, one of the world's most recognizable natural landmarks. At its feet lies the modern city of Cape Town, and beside the calm waters of Table Bay stands a fortress unlike any we have visited before, the Castle of Good Hope. Unlike medieval castles built for kings and noble families, this fortress had a very different purpose. Construction began in 1666 under the Dutch East India Company, one of the most powerful trading organizations in history.
Its mission was practical rather than royal. Ships sailing between Europe and Asia needed a safe harbour where they could repair damaged vessels, gather fresh water, rest exhausted crews, and replenish supplies before continuing their long voyages. Cape Town became one of the most important stopping points on that journey. The Castle of Good Hope protected this growing settlement. Its thick stone walls guarded warehouses filled with valuable cargo. Soldiers watched the coastline for approaching ships. Officials managed trade, recorded supplies, and maintained order within the young colony. Unlike the isolated castles hidden among mountains or forests, this fortress was connected to the entire world. Every few weeks another sailing ship arrived. Its crew might include Dutch merchants, German craftsmen, French refugees, Scandinavian sailors, enslaved people brought against their will from Indonesia, India, Madagascar, and East Africa. Each person carried different languages, different customs, different hopes, different fears. The castle became a meeting place of cultures unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Daily life inside the fortress was busy from dawn until sunset. Blacksmiths repaired anchors and chains.
Carpenters rebuilt damaged masts. Doctors treated sailors weakened by months at sea. Bakers worked through the night preparing bread for departing ships. Fresh vegetables were grown nearby to help prevent illnesses caused by long ocean voyages. Officers carefully recorded every barrel of food, every crate of tools, and every shipment passing through the settlement. Yet beneath this activity lay another reality. Life during the age of sail was often incredibly difficult. Storms destroyed ships without warning. Disease spread rapidly aboard crowded vessels. Many sailors spent years far from home. Some never returned. Others arrived in Cape Town carrying grief after losing friends during dangerous crossings. For them, the castle represented safety, a place where they could finally rest after surviving the unpredictable sea. As we quietly walk through the fortress today, we notice its unusual design. Unlike the tall medieval castles of Europe, the Castle of Good Hope is low and wide. Its 5 massive bastions form the shape of a star. This design reflected the changing nature of warfare. Cannons had transformed military architecture. High stone towers, once effective against arrows and ladders, became vulnerable to artillery. Engineers therefore built lower, thicker walls capable of absorbing powerful cannon fire. History constantly adapts. Architecture adapts with it. The castle we see today reflects that evolution. As afternoon slowly fades, we enter one of the old courtyards. The air carries the faint scent of the nearby ocean. Seagulls circle overhead. Beyond the walls, waves gently roll towards the shore, just as they have for centuries. It is difficult to imagine a more peaceful setting. Yet this quiet place has accumulated its own collection of legends. Perhaps the most famous concerns a mysterious governor. According to local tradition, one of the early colonial governors developed a reputation for severe leadership.
Stories claimed that after his death, strange appearances and unexplained sounds occasionally occurred within the castle. Some visitors believed they glimpsed a tall figure walking along the battlements before disappearing into the evening mist. Others reported hearing footsteps echoing across empty courtyards after sunset. Historians cannot verify these accounts. They belong to local folklore rather than documented evidence. Nevertheless, such stories became part of the castle's identity. Like every fortress we have visited, the Castle of Good Hope reminds us that ghost legends often grow where history has been especially intense. Not because supernatural events have been proven, but because human experiences leave deep emotional impressions. This castle witnessed celebrations when ships safely completed dangerous voyages. It also witnessed sorrow. Families separated for years, lives shaped by colonial expansion. People arriving from distant lands, often without knowing whether they would ever see home again. Every fortress preserves complicated memories. As evening arrives, the ocean breeze grows cooler. We climb gently onto the old defensive walls. From here, the view is extraordinary. Table mounting glows softly beneath the setting sun. The harbour sparkles with golden reflections. Modern Cape Town stretches across the coastline, filled with lights that would have amazed the first settlers. Far beyond the bay lies the open Atlantic. Somewhere across that vast ocean are Europe, the Americas, and countless other shores, connected by centuries of exploration. Standing here encourages quiet reflection.
Thousands of ships once approached this very coastline.
Stories claimed that after his death, strange appearances and unexplained sounds occasionally occurred within the castle. Some visitors believed they glimpsed a tall figure walking along the battlements before disappearing into the evening mist. Others reported hearing footsteps echoing across empty courtyards after sunset. Historians cannot verify these accounts. They belong to local folklore rather than documented evidence. Nevertheless, such stories became part of the castle's identity. Like every fortress we have visited, the Castle of Good Hope reminds us that ghost legends often grow where history has been especially intense. Not because supernatural events have been proven, but because human experiences leave deep emotional impressions. This castle witnessed celebrations when ships safely completed dangerous voyages. It also witnessed sorrow. Families separated for years, lives shaped by colonial expansion. People arriving from distant lands, often without knowing whether they would ever see home again. Every fortress preserves complicated memories. As evening arrives, the ocean breeze grows cooler. We climb gently onto the old defensive walls. From here, the view is extraordinary. Table mounting glows softly beneath the setting sun. The harbour sparkles with golden reflections. Modern Cape Town stretches across the coastline, filled with lights that would have amazed the first settlers. Far beyond the bay lies the open Atlantic. Somewhere across that vast ocean are Europe, the Americas, and countless other shores, connected by centuries of exploration. Standing here encourages quiet reflection. Thousands of ships once approached this very coastline.
Each carried hundreds of individual stories, adventures, dreams, hardships, reunions, farewells. Most have long been forgotten, yet the castle remains. Its walls continue watching over the bay exactly as they have for more than 300 years. As darkness settles completely, lanterns illuminate parts of the fortress. The sea becomes almost invisible beneath the night sky. Only the rhythmic sound of gentle waves reaches our ears. It is wonderfully calming. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson offered by the Castle of Good Hope. History is not made only by kings and battles. It is also shaped by ordinary people. Sailors crossing impossible distances, craftsmen building strong walls, gardeners growing food, doctors caring for strangers, families waiting patiently for loved ones to return from the sea. These quiet lives deserve remembrance alongside the famous names recorded in history books. The ghost stories associated with this place simply remind us that every great historical site contains far more human stories than written records alone can preserve. The stars now shine brightly above the southern hemisphere. Our peaceful journey, however, is far from over. We soon return to northern Europe, where another remarkable fortress awaits beside the Danish countryside. Its elegant walls conceal centuries of royal politics, imprisonment, and one of Scandinavia's most enduring ghost legends.
As the stars slowly fade above the southern Atlantic, our journey turns north once more. We leave the shores of South Africa behind and follow the old sea routes that connected continents for centuries. Days seem to pass as ships once crossed vast oceans, navigating only by the stars, the wind, and the steady rhythm of the waves. Eventually, the colder waters of northern Europe welcome us once again. The coastline of Denmark appears quietly on the horizon. Unlike the dramatic mountains of Scotland or the towering forests of Romania, the Danish landscape is gentle and peaceful. Rolling green fields stretch toward the sea. Small villages rest beside quiet churches whose bells have echoed across the countryside for hundreds of years. Golden wheat sways softly beneath the summer breeze, while white clouds drift lazily across an endless blue sky. Hidden among these calm surroundings stands one of Denmark's oldest castles, Chillingham Castle. At first glance, it hardly seems like a place where ghost stories would flourish. Its elegant white walls shine brightly beneath the afternoon sun. Beautiful gardens surround the estate.
Large windows reflect the nearby countryside. Everything feels calm, refined and welcoming. Yet behind this graceful appearance lies nearly 8 centuries of remarkable history. Originally constructed around the early 13th century, Dragsham began life as a fortified palace belonging to the church. During medieval Europe, the church possessed enormous influence. Bishops governed large territories, collected taxes, managed farmland, and often played important roles in politics alongside kings and noble families. Castles such as Dragsham protected both religious authority and valuable property. Life here differed from the military strongholds we have already visited. While soldiers certainly guarded the estate when necessary, much of daily life focused on administration. Priests copied important documents. Messengers arrived carrying letters from distant dioceses.
Farmers delivered harvests collected from surrounding lands. Visitors sought legal decisions, religious guidance, or protection during uncertain times. The castle became both a home and a centre of governance. Then, during the 16th century, Denmark experienced enormous change. The Protestant Reformation swept across northern Europe. Religious authority shifted dramatically. Many church properties, including Dragsham, passed into royal control. The castle entered a new chapter of its history. No longer simply a religious residence, it became something quite different, a prison. Unlike ordinary prisons, however, Dragsham often held important political prisoners. These were not common criminals. Many were noblemen, military leaders, or influential individuals who had fallen out of favour with the Danish crown. Some remained confined for years, others spent decades inside the castle. One prisoner became especially famous. His name was James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell. History remembers him as the 3rd husband of Mary, Queen of Scots. After political turmoil forced him from Scotland, Bothwell eventually found himself imprisoned at Dragsham Castle. Historical records suggest that he remained here for approximately 10 years, until his death in 1578. Visitors today can still see the room traditionally associated with his imprisonment. Standing inside the chamber is a quiet experience. The stone walls feel solid and timeless. A small window admits only limited daylight. It is easy to imagine how slowly time must have passed for someone unable to leave. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years.
Few experiences shape human memory more deeply than long isolation. Perhaps that is one reason castles used as prisons often inspire ghost stories. Not because supernatural events have been proven, but because they remind us of lives marked by waiting, uncertainty, and hope. Over time, Dragsham acquired several famous legends. Among the most well-known is the story of the Grey Lady. According to local tradition, she appears as a gentlewoman dressed in soft grey clothing. Unlike frightening ghost tales, she is generally described as kind and peaceful. Some believe she watches quietly over the castle rather than haunting it. Servants centuries ago reportedly claimed to glimpse her walking silently through the corridors before disappearing without a sound. Whether anyone truly saw such a figure can never be established. Still, the story remained part of the castle's identity for generations. Another legend tells of the White Lady. This tale carries a more tragic tone. According to folklore, a young noblewoman fell deeply in love with a servant. During an age when marriages among noble families were often arranged for political or financial reasons, such a relationship would have been considered unacceptable. The story claims that when her family discovered the secret romance, they punished her severely. Some versions say she was imprisoned within the castle walls themselves. Others suggest she died of heartbreak. Centuries later, workers conducting renovations reportedly uncovered human remains hidden inside part of the structure. Almost immediately, local tradition connected the discovery with the legend of the White Lady. Historians urge caution. Ancient buildings frequently contain unexpected archaeological discoveries. Finding old remains does not automatically confirm centuries-old stories. Yet the timing fascinated many people. Once again, history and folklore became intertwined.
Perhaps the most important lesson of Dragsham Castle is that ghost stories often preserve emotional truths, even when historical details remain uncertain. The White Lady represents forbidden love. The Grey Lady symbolizes quiet loyalty. The imprisoned Earl reminds us of political ambition and the unpredictable nature of power. These themes appear throughout history, regardless of the century. As evening gently approaches, we stroll through the castle gardens. The setting sun bathes the white walls in warm golden light. Flowers bloom beside carefully trimmed pathways. Birdsong gradually gives way to the peaceful sounds of evening. Everything feels wonderfully serene. It is difficult to imagine fear here. Instead, the castle encourages reflection. Every generation leaves behind stories. Some survive through official records, others continue through family traditions, still others become legends, whispered by local guides long after the original events have faded from memory. Ghost stories, in many ways, are simply another form of remembrance. They allow forgotten voices to remain part of the landscape. As darkness settles across the Danish countryside, soft lights begin glowing inside the castle windows. The surrounding fields grow quiet beneath a sky filled with stars. The old walls remain exactly where they have stood for centuries, patiently observing each passing season. Standing here, we realize that haunted castles are not truly about fear. They are about memory, about history, about the countless ordinary and extraordinary lives that unfolded behind these ancient stones. With one last glance at Chillingham Castle, we continue our peaceful journey. Across the English countryside, another ruined fortress awaits. Unlike the elegant castles still standing proudly today, this next destination has surrendered much of itself to nature. Its broken towers and ivy-covered walls have inspired one of England's most beautiful and melancholy ghost legends.
The quiet fields of Denmark slowly disappear behind us as our journey crosses the calm waters of the North Sea once again. Before long, the green hills of southwestern England come gently into view. Unlike the dramatic border castles we visited earlier, this landscape feels softer and more peaceful. Narrow country lanes wind between ancient hedgerows. Sheep graze lazily across rolling meadows, while centuries-old oak trees cast long shadows over quiet streams. Hidden within one of Devon's wooded valleys stand the ivy-covered ruins of Bury Pomeroy Castle. At first sight, it hardly resembles the grand fortresses we have visited throughout our journey. Its walls are broken, its towers are incomplete. Grass grows between weathered stones. Wildflowers bloom where noble families once walked. Nature has slowly reclaimed much of the castle. Yet this quiet ruin has earned one of England's most haunting reputations. Unlike castles that still echo with footsteps from modern visitors, Bury Pomeroy feels wonderfully still. Silence fills every empty window. Birds nest where banners once flew. Tree roots gently embrace foundations that have stood for nearly 700 years. Rather than resisting time, the castle seems to have accepted it. Construction began during the late 13th century when the powerful Pomeroy family established their stronghold here. The location offered practical advantages. The surrounding hills provided natural protection. Nearby forests supplied timber for building and heating. Fresh water flowed through the valley below. Like many medieval noble families, the Pomeroys managed farmland, settled local disputes, and maintained loyal relationships with neighboring landowners. Daily life revolved around the rhythm of the seasons. Spring brought planting. Summer filled the fields with activity. Autumn meant harvesting crops before winter arrived. During colder months, the Great Hall became the heart of castle life. Huge fireplaces warmed the rooms. Families gathered together for meals. Travelers shared stories from distant towns.
Musicians performed while children listened with wide-eyed curiosity. The castle was not simply a military fortress, it was a home. Centuries later, ownership eventually passed to the Seymour family, one of England's most influential noble houses. They dreamed of transforming the medieval castle into a magnificent Renaissance mansion. Construction began with great ambition. Elegant new buildings rose beside the older fortress. Large windows replaced narrow defensive openings. Decorative architecture reflected changing tastes. Comfort gradually became more important than defense. Yet something unexpected happened, for reasons historians still debate. Perhaps financial difficulties, changing political priorities, or shifting family fortunes, the enormous project was never completed. The castle was quietly abandoned. Generation after generation passed. Without constant care, roofs collapsed, wooden beams decayed, rain slowly weakened the stonework. Nature patiently reclaimed the once grand residence. Today, Bury Pomeroy remains one of England's most beautiful castle ruins. Its unfinished appearance gives the place a uniquely peaceful atmosphere. There is no grand furniture, no richly decorated halls, only ancient stone, open sky, and the gentle sounds of birdsong. Perhaps that silence encouraged the growth of local legends. The most famous story concerns the White Lady. According to local tradition, she wanders quietly through the castle ruins, often appearing near the old dungeon or along the upper walls. Unlike many frightening ghost stories, witnesses usually describe her as deeply sorrowful rather than threatening. Some versions identify her as Margaret Pomeroy, a member of the noble family who, according to legend, became the victim of jealousy.
The story claims that Margaret possessed exceptional beauty. Her sister, overcome by envy, supposedly imprisoned her inside one of the castle's towers. There, Margaret slowly weakened from hunger until she eventually died. It is a heartbreaking tale. Yet historians have found no reliable evidence confirming that such an event actually occurred. The legend appears to have developed gradually through local storytelling rather than surviving medieval records. Nevertheless, it has endured for centuries. Why? Perhaps because it reflects emotions everyone understands: jealousy, loneliness, loss. These themes appear throughout literature, folklore, and history across countless cultures. The White Lady became a symbol of those timeless emotions. Another legend speaks of the Blue Lady. Unlike the quiet White Lady, this mysterious figure is said to lure curious visitors towards the castle's underground passages. Some stories claim she gestures silently from distant archways. Others say she appears only briefly before disappearing into the darkness below. Again, historians classify these tales as folklore. Old ruins naturally inspire vivid imagination. Half-collapsed walls create unusual shadows. Changing weather transforms the appearance of ancient stone. Morning mist drifts through empty windows. Moonlight paints broken towers with silver light.
It requires very little imagination to believe that someone has just disappeared around the next corner. As we slowly wander through the castle today, sunlight filters gently through gaps where roofs once stood. Wild ivy climbs steadily upward, covering centuries-old walls with vibrant green leaves. Flowers bloom beside worn staircases. Butterflies drift peacefully across the old courtyard. Nature has become the castle's newest caretaker. Unlike human builders, nature works patiently, one season after another, one century after another. There is no hurry, only quiet transformation. Standing here, we begin to notice something remarkable. Although Bury Pomeroy is famous for ghost stories, the atmosphere feels surprisingly comforting. There is sadness, certainly. History always carries moments of sorrow. Yet there is also acceptance. The castle no longer struggles against time. Instead, it exists in harmony with the surrounding landscape. Perhaps that is why artists, writers, and photographers continue visiting these ruins. They capture not fear, but beauty. Beauty shaped by history, beauty shaped by time, beauty shaped by gentle decay. As afternoon slowly becomes evening, golden sunlight warms the remaining stone towers. Long shadows stretch across the grass. The air grows wonderfully still. Somewhere nearby, an owl prepares for another quiet night. The old walls remain silent, yet their silence speaks volumes. Every missing roof reminds us that nothing built by human hands lasts forever. Even the greatest castles eventually surrender to time, and somehow there is peace in that realization. History is not only about preserving the past exactly as it was, it is also about accepting change. Every generation inherits something, adds something, loses something, leaves something behind for those who follow. Bury Pomeroy Castle embodies that gentle cycle perfectly. As darkness settles softly across the Devon countryside, the ruined fortress becomes almost dreamlike beneath the rising moon.
The legends of the White Lady and the Blue Lady continue to welcome curious visitors, just as they have for generations. Whether those figures ever truly walked these grounds matters less than the stories themselves. They remind us that every ancient place carries memories far richer than stone alone can preserve. Our peaceful journey now leaves England once more. Ahead lies the Austrian Alps, where another formidable castle rises above dense forests. Its history is far darker than many we have encountered so far, shaped by fear, superstition, and one of Europe's most tragic chapters, the era of the witch trials.
The peaceful ruins of Berry Pomeroy slowly fade into the distance as our journey continues across mainland Europe once again. We travel southeast, crossing rivers, forests, and gentle plains until the landscape begins to rise. Soon the mighty Alps appear before us. Snow-capped peaks stretch across the horizon like silent guardians, while emerald valleys lie peacefully beneath them. Crystal-clear rivers rush through narrow gorges, reflecting towering mountains that have watched over this land for thousands of years. Nestled high within one of these valleys, in the Austrian region of Salzburg, stands Moosham Castle. Unlike the elegant French chateaux or the royal palaces of Scotland, Moosham feels sturdy and practical. Its thick stone walls were built to endure harsh alpine winters. Steep roofs shed heavy snowfall. Narrow windows protected those inside from bitter mountain winds. The castle rises confidently above the surrounding forests, where pine trees blanket the hillsides in every direction. Today, the view is breathtakingly peaceful. Birds glide through the clear mountain air. Wildflowers bloom beside ancient pathways. The distant sound of cowbells echoes gently across the valley. Yet several centuries ago, this quiet region became the setting for one of Europe's darkest chapters. Unlike many haunted castles whose legends revolve around mysterious figures or tragic romances, Moosham's reputation grew from real historical events shaped by fear, by misunderstanding, and by the dangerous consequences of superstition. To understand these stories, we must first remember that life in 17th century Europe was filled with uncertainty. Scientific knowledge remained limited. Disease appeared without warning. Harvests sometimes failed after unexpected storms. Long winters threatened food supplies. When tragedy struck, people desperately searched for explanations. Why had livestock suddenly died?
Why had illness spread through an entire village? Why had crops withered despite careful work? Today, we understand bacteria, viruses, weather systems, and natural disasters. Centuries ago, those explanations did not exist. Many communities instead believed that unseen supernatural forces influenced everyday life. Across Europe, accusations of witchcraft became increasingly common during the 16th and 17th centuries. Fear spread rapidly from village to village. Ordinary neighbors sometimes accused one another of causing misfortune through magical means. The consequences could be devastating. Moosham Castle became one of the administrative centers where such accusations were investigated. Historical records confirm that numerous witch trials took place here during the late 1600s. Many innocent people were questioned, some were imprisoned. Others faced severe punishments based upon beliefs that modern society recognizes as deeply unjust. Standing inside the castle today, it is impossible not to reflect upon those lives. Most of the accused were ordinary people, farmers, craftsmen, widows, village healers, individuals caught in a wave of fear that swept across much of Europe. History reminds us that fear can sometimes become more dangerous than the unknown itself. As we quietly enter the castle's old courtroom, sunlight filters through tall windows onto worn wooden floors. The room feels surprisingly simple. A large table stands where officials once gathered. Stone walls echo softly with every step.
Nothing here appears dramatic, yet within these quiet surroundings, decisions were once made that forever changed countless lives. It is a solemn place, not because of ghost stories, but because real history unfolded here. Over time, local legends naturally developed. Some visitors claimed to hear distant voices within empty corridors. Others reported unusual footsteps after sunset. Still others described an overwhelming feeling of sadness while exploring certain rooms. Modern psychology offers thoughtful explanations. When people know that tragic events occurred in a particular location, they often experience stronger emotional responses. Ancient buildings also possess unique acoustics. Echoes travel unexpectedly through stone passageways. Changing temperatures cause wooden beams to shift quietly throughout the day. Old castles are never completely silent. They breathe with age. Every creak tells a story of centuries passing. One particularly unusual legend associated with Moosham concerns wolves. According to local folklore, mysterious wolf attacks increased during the same period as the witch trials. Villagers, already frightened by unexplained events, sometimes believed that werewolves, rather than ordinary wolves, roamed the surrounding forests. Today, historians recognize several likely explanations. Harsh winters often drove hungry wolves closer to human settlements. Fear encouraged exaggerated reports. Stories passed from one village to another naturally became more dramatic over time. A single wolf became a pack.
A distant howl became something supernatural. Folklore transformed ordinary wildlife into legendary creatures. The mountains themselves encouraged such imagination. Dense forests covered enormous areas. Travel after sunset was genuinely dangerous. Without modern roads or artificial lighting, even familiar paths became difficult to follow. Mist drifted silently between the trees. Wind echoed strangely through narrow valleys. Every unfamiliar sound demanded attention. It is hardly surprising that extraordinary stories flourished here. As afternoon gently fades, we climb one of Moosham Castle's towers. The view is magnificent. Below us, green valleys stretch peacefully towards distant villages. Snow still rests upon the highest peaks despite the warmth of summer. Tiny farmhouses appear almost toy-like against the vast alpine landscape. Everything feels calm. Standing here, it becomes difficult to imagine the fear that once gripped these communities. History has a remarkable ability to heal landscapes. Fields once marked by tragedy become places where children play. Forests once associated with frightening legends become peaceful hiking trails. Castles once feared become museums welcoming curious visitors from around the world. Time changes everything. Perhaps that is one of history's greatest gifts. It allows us to remember the past without remaining trapped within it. As evening settles across the mountains, the setting sun paints the castle walls in soft shades of gold and amber. The air grows cool. A gentle breeze carries the scent of pine forests through the ancient courtyard. Somewhere far below, church bells quietly ring across the valley. Their familiar sound reminds us that generations have lived peaceful lives here after the difficult events of the past. Moosham Castle teaches us an important lesson. The most haunting places are not necessarily those surrounded by supernatural legends. Sometimes they are places where ordinary people experienced extraordinary hardship. Remembering those lives with compassion is perhaps the greatest form of respect history can offer. The stars now begin appearing above the Austrian Alps. Our quiet journey, however, continues onward. Beyond these mountains lies Switzerland, where another ancient fortress overlooks a peaceful valley. There, the mysterious legend of a little girl known as the White Lady of Montebello has gently echoed through the centuries, becoming one of Europe's most touching castle stories.
The first light of dawn slowly touches the snowy peaks of the Alps as we leave Austria behind. Our journey continues westward through winding mountain passes, where crystal-clear streams tumble over smooth stones and quiet villages rest beneath towering cliffs. Wooden chalets with flower-filled balconies dot the valleys, while church bells drift softly across the cool morning air. Soon we cross into the peaceful landscapes of southern Switzerland. Above the historic town of Bellinzona rises a remarkable group of medieval fortifications that have guarded these valleys for centuries. Among them stands Montebello Castle. Unlike many castles hidden deep within forests, Montebello occupies a strategic hill overlooking important trade routes that once connected northern and southern Europe. Merchants carrying silk, salt, spices, and precious metals passed beneath its walls, while soldiers carefully watched every traveler entering the valley. Its position made it one of the most important defensive castles in medieval Switzerland. Today, however, the atmosphere feels wonderfully calm. The mountains surround the castle like silent protectors. Fresh alpine air fills every courtyard. Wildflowers bloom beside ancient stone pathways. Children's laughter from the town below occasionally drifts upward on the breeze. It is difficult to imagine this peaceful place becoming famous for one of Europe's most emotional ghost legends. Yet for generations, visitors have come here hoping to learn about a little girl known simply as Azarina. Her story has become inseparable from Montebello Castle. According to local tradition, Azarina lived here during the late 14th century. Her real name, the legend says, was Gwendolina. She was the young daughter of the castle's lord. Unlike most children of her time, however, she possessed a very unusual appearance.
The story claims that she was born with extremely pale skin and very light hair, characteristics that frightened many people living during the Middle Ages.
Centuries ago, medical science could not explain conditions such as albinism. Instead, unusual physical features were often misunderstood. Some people believed they carried mysterious meanings. Others feared they were signs of misfortune. Wanting to protect their daughter from suspicion, Azarina's parents reportedly encouraged her caretakers to color her hair with natural dyes. Yet according to the legend, her hair always retained a faint bluish tint. From this detail came the affectionate nickname Azarina, meaning little blue one. Whether this story reflects historical fact remains uncertain. No contemporary documents clearly confirm her existence. Most historians regard the tale as folklore that gradually developed over many generations. Even so, it has remained one of Italy and Switzerland's most beloved castle legends. The story continues. One stormy afternoon, while playing inside the castle, Azarina chased her favorite cloth ball towards a staircase leading to the lower chambers. The servants heard the ball bounce down the steps. Moments later, they heard the little girl following it. Then, silence. When the servants rushed downstairs, Azarina had disappeared. Every room was searched, every corridor explored, the surrounding hills were examined. Yet according to the legend, the child was never found. No one could explain what had happened.
As decades became centuries, local people began telling a gentle story. They believed that every 5 years, the faint sound of a child laughing, or the soft bounce of a small ball, could sometimes be heard within the castle walls. Unlike many haunted legends filled with fear, Azarina's story carries a quiet sadness. It speaks not of revenge or anger, but of loss, of parents searching endlessly for a beloved child, of unanswered questions that linger long after memories begin to fade. As we slowly walk through Montebello Castle today, it is easy to understand why such a story took root here. The narrow staircases twist unexpectedly. Stone corridors branch into quiet rooms. Sunlight filters softly through ancient windows, leaving gentle shadows across the floor. Children visiting the castle often run happily through the courtyard, their laughter echoing against the old walls. That sound alone reminds us how naturally stories become attached to places where families once lived. Despite its military purpose, Montebello was also a home. Parents raised children here. Meals were shared around large wooden tables, lessons were taught, birthdays celebrated. Winter evenings were spent beside warm fireplaces, while snow quietly covered the surrounding mountains. The castle witnessed ordinary family life as much as extraordinary historical events. Perhaps that is why Azarina's legend feels so deeply human. Every parent understands the instinct to protect a child. Every family understands the fear of uncertainty. The story survives because its emotions remain universal. Modern researchers have carefully examined the legend. Some suggest that it may have grown from fragments of older local traditions. Others believe it developed gradually to attract curious visitors during later centuries.
Still others argue that no single explanation fully accounts for its remarkable popularity. Sometimes stories survive simply because people find meaning within them. As afternoon slowly becomes evening, we climb the castle walls. Below us, the rooftops of Bellinzona glow warmly beneath the setting sun. The surrounding mountains gradually turn shades of gold, rose, and deep purple. The entire valley seems suspended in peaceful silence. A gentle breeze carries the scent of alpine flowers through the air. Standing here, it becomes clear that Montebello Castle is not truly remembered because of mystery alone. It is remembered because it preserves compassion. The legend encourages us to think not about ghosts, but about childhood, about family, about the enduring love that parents hold for their children across every century. As darkness gently settles over the valley,
Lanterns illuminate the old stone pathways. The castle grows quiet once again. Some visitors may wonder whether Azurina's laughter still echoes through these ancient halls. Others simply appreciate the remarkable beauty of the place itself. Both experiences are perfectly valid. History often speaks in many voices, sometimes through documents, sometimes through architecture, and sometimes through stories that gently remind us of emotions shared by people across hundreds of years. Our peaceful journey now approaches its final group of castles. Before we conclude, we must step back from individual legends and ask a larger question. Why do so many castles around the world become associated with ghosts? Is it the buildings themselves, the history they witnessed, or something deeply human within our own imagination?
As the quiet lights of Montebello Castle slowly disappear behind us, our journey begins to change. Until now, we have wandered from one remarkable fortress to another, each with its own history, its own legends, and its own unforgettable atmosphere. We have crossed mountains, forests, coastlines, and ancient kingdoms, meeting noble families, soldiers, prisoners, merchants, sailors, and ordinary people whose lives became woven into the stones of these castles. Now, rather than visiting a single place, let us gently pause and look at a question that has puzzled historians for generations. Why do so many castles become haunted? Why is it that nearly every ancient fortress, whether in England, Ireland, Scotland, France, Romania, Austria, Denmark, South Africa, or Switzerland, seems to possess at least one ghost story? The answer begins not with ghosts, but with history itself. Castles were unlike ordinary homes. For centuries, they served as the political, military, and emotional centers of entire regions. Within their walls, decisions were made that affected thousands of lives. Kings signed treaties, queens welcomed ambassadors, military commanders planned battles, judges announced punishments, families celebrated weddings, children were born, loved ones died. Generation after generation passed through the very same rooms. Every important moment seemed to leave another invisible layer upon the building. Imagine a castle standing for 700 years. How many footsteps would have crossed its floors? How many conversations filled its halls? How many tears quietly fell behind closed doors? How many joyful celebrations echoed beneath candlelit ceilings? The numbers become almost impossible to imagine. Unlike modern buildings, castles rarely disappeared after a few decades. Instead, they endured. Stone walls survived fires. Towers survived wars. Courtyards survived changing kingdoms. Even when noble families disappeared, the buildings remained. New generations inherited the same staircases, the same fireplaces, the same heavy wooden doors. Every century added another chapter. Eventually, history itself became almost tangible. Visitors often describe feeling something unusual inside ancient castles. Not fear, presence, a quiet awareness that countless lives unfolded here long before their own. Psychologists call this an emotional response to historical environments. It is entirely natural. Human beings are deeply influenced by places connected with meaningful stories. When we stand where history happened, our imagination becomes wonderfully active. An empty hallway no longer feels empty. Instead, we quietly picture servants carrying candles through the darkness. A silent dining hall suddenly fills with imagined laughter. A lonely staircase seems ready to welcome another traveler climbing slowly upward. Our minds reconstruct the past almost automatically. This ability is one of humanity's greatest strengths. It allows us to connect emotionally with people who lived centuries before us. Ghost stories often emerge from this connection, not because spirits have been proven to exist, but because history feels astonishingly alive. Another reason castles inspire legends lies beneath our feet. Many medieval fortresses contained underground chambers. Some served as storage rooms, others became prisons. Many housed supplies during times of siege. A few were used for military purposes that remain only partly understood today. Centuries later, archaeologists occasionally uncover forgotten passages sealed behind stone walls.
Entire rooms remain hidden until restoration work unexpectedly reveals them. Imagine discovering a staircase that no one has entered for 300 years. Dust covers every surface.
The air feels cool and still. Old wooden doors remain exactly where forgotten builders left them. Such discoveries naturally inspire wonder. Long before archaeology became a scientific discipline, discoveries like these encouraged extraordinary stories. A hidden room became a secret prison. A storage cellar became a torture chamber. A natural cave became the entrance to another world. Each generation added another layer of imagination. Sometimes these stories exaggerated reality. Sometimes they preserved genuine memories that official records had forgotten. History and folklore became partners rather than rivals. One supported facts, the other preserved emotion. Ancient curses also became common themes in castle legends. Many medieval people sincerely believed that certain places could be blessed or cursed. Religion shaped nearly every aspect of daily life. Holy relics protected communities. Sacred prayers guarded travelers. Likewise, acts considered deeply unjust were sometimes believed to leave lasting spiritual consequences. If a nobleman betrayed his family, if a sacred promise was broken.
If an innocent person suffered unfairly, people naturally searched for moral meaning. A curse offered an explanation. It suggested that wrongdoing could never truly disappear. Whether taken literally or symbolically, such stories reminded listeners that actions carry consequences. In this way, ghost legends often served as moral lessons. A cruel ruler became a restless spirit. A dishonest official wandered forever through empty corridors. A grieving mother searched endlessly for her child. These stories encouraged compassion. They warned against greed, pride, betrayal, and unnecessary violence. Long before printed books became common, storytelling was one of society's greatest teachers. Children learned values by listening beside winter fireplaces. Travelers exchanged local legends while resting at roadside inns. Monks recorded remarkable tales within handwritten manuscripts. History survived not only through official documents, but through memory. As evening quietly approaches, imagine walking through a forgotten castle dungeon. The stone walls feel cool beneath your fingertips. Water drips gently from the ceiling. A narrow beam of sunlight enters through a tiny opening high above. The silence is complete. It is not frightening, only deeply still. Places like this encourage reflection. They remind us how fortunate we are to live in a world where justice, knowledge, and human rights continue striving to improve with every generation. Many dungeons once symbolized fear. Today they serve as classrooms. Visitors walk through them not to imprison anyone, but to learn from history. That transformation may be one of the greatest victories of all. History cannot be changed, but it can teach. The castles we have explored tonight stand not as monuments to ghosts, but as monuments to human experience. They remind us of courage shown during difficult times, of resilience after tragedy, of hope surviving uncertainty, and of memory quietly passing from one generation to the next. Outside, the evening sky grows darker. Stars slowly appear above ancient towers scattered across Europe and beyond. Each castle keeps its own stories. Some are carefully documented by historians. Others survive only through whispered legends. Both deserve thoughtful respect. For history is richer when we understand not only what happened, but also what people believed had happened. As our peaceful journey continues, we move one step closer to understanding the greatest mystery of all, not whether castles are haunted, but why human beings have always needed stories to make sense of the past. A cruel ruler became a restless spirit. A dishonest official wandered forever through empty corridors. A grieving mother searched endlessly for her child. These stories encouraged compassion. They warned against greed, pride, betrayal, and unnecessary violence. Long before printed books became common, storytelling was one of society's greatest teachers. Children learned values by listening beside winter fireplaces. Travelers exchanged local legends while resting at roadside inns. Monks recorded remarkable tales within handwritten manuscripts. History survived not only through official documents, but through memory. As evening quietly approaches, imagine walking through a forgotten castle dungeon. The stone walls feel cool beneath your fingertips. Water drips gently from the ceiling. A narrow beam of sunlight enters through a tiny opening high above. The silence is complete. It is not frightening, only deeply still. Places like this encourage reflection. They remind us how fortunate we are to live in a world where justice, knowledge, and human rights continue striving to improve with every generation. Many dungeons once symbolized fear. Today they serve as classrooms. Visitors walk through them not to imprison anyone, but to learn from history. That transformation may be one of the greatest victories of all. History cannot be changed, but it can teach. The castles we have explored tonight stand not as monuments to ghosts, but as monuments to human experience. They remind us of courage shown during difficult times, of resilience after tragedy, of hope surviving uncertainty, and of memory quietly passing from one generation to the next. Outside, the evening sky grows darker. Stars slowly appear above ancient towers scattered across Europe and beyond. Each castle keeps its own stories. Some are carefully documented by historians, others survive only through whispered legends. Both deserve thoughtful respect, for history is richer when we understand not only what happened, but also what people believed had happened. As our peaceful journey continues, we move one step closer to understanding the greatest mystery of all, not whether castles are haunted, but why human beings have always needed stories to make sense of the past.
The night has grown wonderfully quiet. Above us, countless stars shine over ancient towers scattered across Europe and beyond. Some castles still stand proudly, illuminated by gentle lights that welcome evening visitors. Others rest peacefully in ruins, their broken walls covered with ivy and wildflowers. A few remain hidden within forests, where only birds and the wind disturb the silence. Each one carries stories. Some are carefully preserved in royal archives. Others survive only because grandparents whispered them to curious children beside warm fireplaces. Tonight, after visiting so many remarkable places, we can finally ask a fascinating question. Why do haunted castle stories appear in almost every culture? The answer begins with one simple idea. Human beings are natural storytellers. Long before books, radio, television, or the internet, stories helped people understand the world around them. A strange sound during the night became a tale. An unexplained disappearance became a legend. An old family memory slowly transformed into folklore. Stories connected generations. They preserved lessons. They entertained listeners during long winter evenings. Most importantly, they helped communities remember. Imagine a small medieval village standing beside an ancient castle. Children grow up hearing that a certain tower should never be entered after sunset. Perhaps the original warning had a practical purpose. The staircase might have been damaged. Loose stones could fall without warning. An abandoned well might lie hidden beneath overgrown grass. Instead of explaining complicated dangers to every child, parents created a memorable story. Do not go there, they might say. The old ghost still watches the tower. The child remembered. The lesson was learned. Across centuries, the practical reason disappeared. The ghost story remained. Many historians believe this process explains a surprising number of local legends. Folklore often preserved useful knowledge.
Another important reason involves memory itself. Historic buildings naturally become symbols. Imagine a castle where a beloved queen once lived. After her death, future generations continue visiting the same rooms. They see her portrait. They hear stories about her kindness. Gradually, people begin saying they can still feel her presence. Notice the language carefully. They do not necessarily claim to see a ghost. Instead, they express something emotional. The Queen's memory feels alive. That feeling is entirely understandable. Powerful historical figures often leave lasting impressions upon places closely associated with them. Modern psychology offers another fascinating explanation. Our brains constantly search for patterns. This ability has helped humans survive for thousands of years. If something moves unexpectedly in the corner of our vision, the brain immediately asks, "What was that?" Most of the time, the answer is perfectly ordinary. A bird, a shadow, a branch moving in the wind. Yet inside an ancient castle already famous for ghost stories, expectation changes perception. The same shadow suddenly feels significant. The same creaking floorboard becomes mysterious. Scientists call this confirmation bias. When we expect something unusual, we become much more likely to notice ordinary events that seem to support that expectation. It is not dishonesty, it is simply how the human brain naturally works. Interestingly, this happens in many areas of life. We notice what we are prepared to notice.
Castles provide the perfect environment for such experiences. Their architecture contributes greatly to the atmosphere. Consider their design. Long stone corridors amplify echoes. Spiral staircases create unusual acoustics. Massive wooden doors shift gently as humidity changes. Thick walls trap cool air, while narrow windows allow sudden breezes to pass through. Every feature built for defense centuries ago now creates remarkable sensory experiences. An old castle is never completely silent. It breathes. Stone slowly expands beneath summer heat. Wood contracts during cold nights. Water travels through ancient foundations. Birds nest inside forgotten towers. Bats flutter beneath roof beams. The building quietly lives. Visitors naturally notice these subtle sounds. When combined with centuries of fascinating history, they become unforgettable. There is another reason haunted castle stories continue flourishing today. People enjoy mystery. Even in our modern world of satellites, computers, and scientific research, we remain deeply curious about unanswered questions. Mystery encourages imagination. It invites conversation. Two visitors may walk through exactly the same room. One notices beautiful medieval architecture. The other feels an unusual atmosphere. Neither experience is wrong. Each reflects the unique way individuals connect with history. Ghost stories also remind us that history is deeply personal. Official documents record battles, treaties, royal births, and political events. But ordinary people often disappear from written history. Servants, stable workers, gardeners, blacksmiths, children, traveling musicians, village healers, their names were rarely recorded.
Yet they spent entire lives inside these castles. Folklore quietly returns them to the story. Perhaps the mysterious footsteps belong not to a famous king, but to an unnamed servant carrying firewood before dawn. Perhaps the gentle singing heard in legend remembers generations of cooks preparing evening meals. Whether literally true or not, these stories honor forgotten lives. As midnight approaches, imagine standing alone within an empty castle courtyard. The moon hangs high above. Stars sparkle clearly overhead. A cool breeze moves gently across ancient stone. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls into the darkness. You close your eyes for a moment. When you open them again, nothing has changed. The castle remains peaceful. Yet you suddenly feel connected to everyone who has stood in this exact place before. A Roman soldier, a medieval guard, a noblewoman watching the stars, a traveler arriving after sunset, a child playing centuries ago. This feeling is not supernatural. It is historical imagination, and it is one of the most beautiful gifts ancient places can offer. Haunted castles continue inspiring us because they blur the line between memory and imagination. They remind us that history is not simply a collection of dates. It is the story of real people. People who loved, worked, celebrated, mourned, hoped, and dreamed beneath the same sky we see tonight. As our journey gently nears its conclusion, only a few final chapters remain. Soon we will discover how archaeologists carefully separate historical evidence from legend, revealing that truth and folklore often complement rather than contradict one another.
The stars continue their slow journey across the night sky. Far below, ancient castles rest quietly beneath the moon, their towers casting long shadows over courtyards that have witnessed centuries of human history. The wind still whispers through narrow windows, just as it did long before the first historian carefully recorded their stories. Tonight, our own journey reaches one of its most fascinating moments. For centuries, storytellers and historians have walked side by side. One preserves facts, the other preserves meaning. Neither tells the entire story alone. To truly understand the world's haunted castles, we must learn how archaeology and legend quietly work together. Imagine arriving at a ruined castle where local people have shared the same ghost story for hundreds of years. They tell you that beneath an old tower lies a forgotten dungeon. Visitors occasionally hear strange echoes there after sunset. Some even claim mysterious figures wander the underground passages. As an archaeologist, where would you begin? Not with the ghost story itself, but neither would you ignore it.
Instead, you would ask an important question. Why did this particular story begin here? Sometimes legends point towards genuine historical discoveries. Again and again, archaeologists have found hidden rooms, forgotten staircases, sealed wells, ancient prisons, and abandoned tunnels beneath castles that local folklore had long considered mysterious. The legends were not always literally true, yet they often preserved the memory that something unusual existed. A hidden doorway became a haunted passage. A forgotten cellar became a ghost's chamber. An abandoned escape tunnel became the road where restless spirits supposedly wandered. History remained hidden inside the story. This has happened many times across Europe. At Leap Castle, restoration work uncovered an ancient underground chamber containing human remains. The discovery shocked historians, but it did not prove ghost stories.
Instead, it confirmed that the castle had experienced a far more complicated history than earlier generations fully understood. The archaeological evidence supported the existence of forgotten tragedies. The legends had preserved the emotional memory of those events. A similar pattern appears at Chillingham Castle. During restoration projects, workers discovered concealed spaces inside the ancient walls. Again, folklore and history briefly touched one another, not because ghosts had been confirmed, but because forgotten architectural features reminded everyone how easily stories can grow from real discoveries. Archaeology teaches us patience. Excavations rarely produce dramatic answers overnight. Sometimes a single broken piece of pottery takes weeks to study. A wooden beam might reveal its age through careful scientific testing. Layers of soil preserve tiny clues about daily life that no written document ever recorded. Each discovery adds another small piece to an enormous historical puzzle. Legends, by contrast, often move quickly. A mysterious event becomes a story. The story becomes tradition. Tradition becomes local identity. One process is slow, the other is wonderfully alive. Together, they help us understand the past from different directions. As we quietly walk through another imagined castle courtyard, notice how ordinary details suddenly become fascinating. A worn staircase, a cracked stone wall, a narrow window overlooking distant hills. None of these features appears extraordinary on its own, yet every one has survived hundreds of years. How many people leaned against this wall? How many hands touched this staircase? How many children gazed through this window, wondering what lay beyond the horizon? These questions rarely appear in official records. Archaeology sometimes answers a few of them.
Folklore answers the rest with imagination. One of the greatest changes in modern history has been the development of scientific archaeology itself. Centuries ago, people exploring old castles often searched for treasure, gold, jewels, royal artifacts. Today, archaeologists value something much more meaningful: information. A simple cooking pot may reveal what people ate. Animal bones tell us about farming and hunting. Tiny seeds preserved beneath ancient floors reveal gardens that disappeared centuries ago. Even discarded rubbish becomes valuable. Everyday life often leaves the richest historical evidence. Ironically, ghost stories sometimes encourage these discoveries. A rumored haunted room attracts attention. Researchers investigate. Careful excavation follows. Unexpected historical evidence emerges. In this way, folklore occasionally helps guide science towards forgotten places. History and legend become unexpected partners. This partnership also teaches an important lesson about respect. Modern historians do not laugh at ancient stories. Neither do responsible researchers accept them without evidence. Instead, they ask thoughtful questions. What emotions does this legend preserve? What historical event may have inspired it? What cultural values does it reflect? Why has this story survived while countless others disappeared? These questions transform folklore into something deeply valuable. Not because every legend is literally true, but because every legend tells us something true about the people who created it. Perhaps they feared war. Perhaps they mourned a lost child. Perhaps they admired courage. Perhaps they warned future generations against betrayal. Ghost stories become emotional history, and emotional history deserves careful listening.
As the night grows quieter, imagine standing inside an empty archaeological excavation beneath an ancient castle.
Gentle lamps illuminate centuries-old stone walls. Tools rest neatly beside carefully uncovered foundations. Everything is peaceful. Nothing feels frightening, only respectful. Every uncovered object represents a human life. A lost coin, a broken spoon, a child's toy, a forgotten shoe. Someone once held these things. Someone laughed here. Someone worried about tomorrow. Someone hoped for a better future. Suddenly, the distance between the past and the present feels much smaller. Perhaps this is the greatest discovery archaeology offers. Not treasure, not mystery, connection. Connection with ordinary people whose lives quietly shaped history. Ghost legends often begin with extraordinary stories. Archaeology reminds us that ordinary lives matter just as much. Together, they complete one another. One speaks through imagination, the other through evidence. Both encourage us to remember. As dawn slowly approaches on the horizon, our long journey through the world's haunted castles begins preparing for its final reflections. Only 2 peaceful chapters remain. Soon we will explore why the human mind has always been fascinated by ghost stories, and why even in the modern world, these ancient legends continue bringing comfort, curiosity, and wonder, rather than fear.
The horizon has begun to soften. Far to the east, the first hint of dawn gently touches the sky, though the stars still shine brightly above the ancient castles we have visited together tonight. Their towers remain silent beneath the fading moon, while forests, mountains, rivers, and quiet villages slowly awaken after another peaceful night. Our journey has carried us across continents. We have wandered through lonely corridors, climbed weathered battlements, explored forgotten dungeons, and listened to stories passed carefully from one generation to the next. Now, before our journey ends, let us turn our attention inward, not toward the castles, but toward ourselves. Why do human beings enjoy ghost stories? Why have they survived in every culture, across every century, despite enormous advances in science and technology? The answer is surprisingly comforting. Ghost stories are rarely about ghosts. They are about people. From the earliest days of human civilization, stories helped communities understand experiences that were difficult to explain. A loved one passed away. A battle changed a kingdom. A village survived a terrible winter. Parents told stories. Grandparents shared memories. Children listened carefully. The stories carried more than information. They carried emotion. Unlike dates written inside history books, emotions are remembered naturally. A tale about a lonely queen is easier to remember than a list of royal events. A legend about a faithful guard stays in the mind longer than the details of military organization. Stories give history a human face. Modern psychology tells us that the human brain is remarkably skilled at creating narratives. When we encounter incomplete information, our minds naturally fill the missing pieces. Imagine walking through an abandoned castle. You notice worn stone steps leading toward a sealed doorway. No sign explains where it once led. Immediately, your imagination begins asking questions. Who used these stairs? Where did the passage go? Why was it closed? What happened here?
Curiosity is one of humanity's oldest instincts. Without it, explorers would never have crossed oceans, scientists would never have conducted experiments, historians would never have searched forgotten archives. Ghost stories grow from that same curiosity. They begin where certainty ends. Another fascinating aspect of the human mind is something psychologists call agency detection. Thousands of years ago, this ability helped our ancestors survive. Imagine hearing movement in tall grass. If you assumed it was only the wind and it turned out to be a dangerous predator, you might not survive. It was safer for the brain to briefly assume that another living creature was present. Even today, this ancient survival instinct remains part of us. A shadow catches the corner of our eye. A sudden sound interrupts silence. For an instant, the brain asks, "Was someone there?" Usually, the answer is no. Yet inside an old castle already famous for ghost stories, that brief moment feels much more significant. Our expectations quietly shape our experience. Researchers have conducted many fascinating studies on this phenomenon. People who are told that a building is haunted often report noticing unusual sounds, strange sensations, or unexpected emotions more frequently than those who receive no such information.
The building itself has not changed. The human mind has simply become more attentive. This is not weakness, nor is it foolishness. It is simply how our wonderfully complex brains work. Perhaps that explains why haunted castles continue attracting visitors from around the world. People are not always searching for proof of ghosts. More often they seek an experience. They want to feel connected to history. They want to stand where generations once stood. They want to imagine lives very different from their own. Ancient castles provide the perfect setting for that journey. Their architecture slows us down. Thick stone walls soften outside noise. Long corridors encourage quiet reflection. Small windows frame distant landscapes much as they did hundreds of years ago. Modern life, with all its speed and constant activity, briefly fades away. The castle invites patience, and patience allows imagination to flourish. There is another reason ghost stories remain meaningful. They gently remind us that every life leaves traces behind.
Not supernatural traces, human ones. A handwritten letter, a favorite song, a carefully planted garden, a family recipe, a carved name upon an old tree, acts of kindness remembered by grandchildren. These are the true echoes that survive across generations. Historic castles preserve those echoes in stone. Every worn staircase tells us thousands of feet once climbed there. Every polished doorway reminds us of countless hands pushing it open. Every fireplace speaks of families gathering for warmth on cold winter evenings. Ghost stories simply give those silent reminders a voice. As we pause beside one final castle window, the eastern sky grows brighter. The stars begin disappearing one by one. Morning birds greet the coming day with gentle songs. Mist rises slowly from the valleys below. The ancient fortress remains exactly as it has for centuries. Patient, quiet, steadfast. Whether anyone has ever truly encountered a ghost here is a question that history cannot answer. But another question has quietly answered itself. Why do these places matter? Because they help us remember. Not only kings and queens, not only famous battles, but ordinary people whose hopes, fears, friendships and dreams filled these rooms long before we arrived. Every haunted castle is, in truth, a house of memories. Some memories survive in official records, others remain alive through stories. Both deserve our respect. As the first rays of sunlight gently touch the highest towers, our remarkable journey draws very near its end. Only one final chapter remains. Together we will leave the castles behind and watch the new day begin, carrying with us not fear, but gratitude, for history, for storytelling, and for the countless generations whose lives transformed ordinary stone into places of wonder.
The first golden rays of morning spread gently across the horizon. Night quietly slips away. One by one, the stars disappear into the brightening sky, leaving behind the peaceful silhouettes of castles that have watched over valleys, rivers, mountains, and coastlines for hundreds of years. Our long journey is almost complete. Together, we have traveled across Scotland, Ireland, England, France, Romania, Denmark, Austria, Switzerland, South Africa, and beyond. We have explored royal palaces and military fortresses, lonely towers and forgotten prisons, magnificent halls filled with celebration, silent chambers shaped by sorrow. Yet perhaps the greatest discovery was not hidden inside any castle at all. It was hidden inside history itself. Ancient castles are often described as haunted, but after visiting so many of them, a different truth quietly begins to emerge. These places are not haunted by ghosts, they are haunted by memory. Every stone has witnessed countless human lives. Children learned to walk across these floors. Soldiers departed through these gates, uncertain whether they would ever return. Mothers waited beside narrow windows for loved ones sailing home across dangerous seas. Craftsmen repaired broken walls. Gardeners planted trees whose descendants still grow today. Musicians filled great halls with melodies now long forgotten. Servants quietly prepared meals before sunrise. Monks copied books by candlelight. Doctors cared for the sick. Messengers carried urgent news across kingdoms. Most of these people never appeared in history books. Their names disappeared long ago. Yet their lives mattered just as much as those of kings and queens. Perhaps that is why castles continue holding such emotional power. They remind us that history belongs to everyone. As the morning light grows stronger, imagine walking through one final ancient courtyard. The heavy wooden gates stand open. Fresh dew sparkles upon the grass. Swallows circle gracefully above weathered towers. A cool breeze carries the scent of damp stone and wildflowers. Everything feels wonderfully calm.
The silence no longer seems mysterious. Instead, it feels welcoming, like an old friend quietly sharing stories from another age. Across Europe and beyond, many castles now serve entirely new purposes. Some have become museums where families spend peaceful afternoons exploring history. Others welcome travelers seeking quiet holidays surrounded by ancient architecture. Several host concerts beneath vaulted ceilings where musicians once performed centuries ago. Children laugh inside courtyards that were once filled with armored soldiers. Gardens bloom where defensive trenches once stood. Libraries occupy former royal chambers. Restaurants serve meals inside halls where medieval banquets were once held. History continues living, not by remaining frozen in time, but by adapting. Every generation discovers new ways to appreciate these remarkable places. Archaeologists continue uncovering forgotten details. Historians publish new research. Architects carefully restore damaged walls. Conservation experts protect fragile paintings and ancient woodwork. Local communities proudly preserve traditions passed down through countless generations. The castles themselves remain patient. They ask for nothing. They simply continue standing, season after season, year after year, century after century. Spring brings flowers climbing old stone walls. Summer fills the courtyards with sunlight. Autumn paints surrounding forests in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Winter blankets towers beneath quiet snow. The rhythm never changes, only the people passing through. There is something deeply comforting about that thought. Long after we are gone, these castles will likely continue greeting future visitors. New children will hear old legends for the very first time. Future historians will uncover discoveries we cannot yet imagine. New storytellers will continue adding gentle chapters to ancient traditions. History never truly ends. It simply welcomes another generation. Perhaps this explains why haunted castle stories never disappear. They change, they evolve, they adapt to each new era, but their true purpose remains constant. They encourage curiosity.
They preserve memory. They invite kindness towards those who came before us. Most importantly, they remind us that every human life becomes part of a much larger story. As the sun climbs higher into the morning sky, our long journey finally reaches its peaceful conclusion. The castles slowly fade into the distance. The forests grow brighter. The mountains shimmer beneath fresh daylight. Birdsong replaces the quiet sounds of the night. The ghost stories gently settle back into the pages of history where they have rested for generations. Whether one believes in spirits or prefers scientific explanations ultimately matters very little. The real magic has never depended upon proving the impossible. It has always rested within the remarkable ability of human beings to remember, to imagine, to preserve, to learn, and to tell stories that allow the past to remain alive. So, as we prepare to leave these ancient walls behind, take one final slow look across the landscape. The towers stand peacefully beneath the morning sun, no longer mysterious, no longer frightening, simply timeless. They have survived wars, storms, changing kingdoms, forgotten generations, and the steady passage of centuries. And perhaps, after tonight, they have quietly reminded us of something important. History is never truly silent. It speaks through every weathered stone, every forgotten doorway, every gentle legend, and every traveller willing to pause long enough to listen. Thank you for joining this peaceful journey through the world's most haunted castles. May your own path always be filled with curiosity, quiet wonder, and an appreciation for the countless stories that have shaped our world.
As the morning sun rises a little higher, the ancient castles slowly disappear into the soft golden light. The great stone walls that have stood for centuries now rest quietly beneath clear blue skies. Their ghost stories become gentle memories once again. The ravens have taken flight. The owls have returned to sleep. The old wooden gates remain open, welcoming another peaceful day. Somewhere, a cool breeze still moves through forgotten towers. Somewhere, church bells softly echo across distant valleys. Somewhere, history patiently waits for the next curious traveller. But for now, our own journey has come to an end. Tonight we crossed mountains and forests. We wandered through royal halls.
We listened to stories whispered across generations. We explored places where history and imagination met beneath ancient stone ceilings. And perhaps we discovered something unexpected. The world's most haunted castles were never truly about fear. They were always about people. About families who laughed together, children who played in quiet courtyards, soldiers who hoped to return home, builders whose hands shaped walls that still stand today, gardeners who planted trees whose shade continues to comfort visitors centuries later. History survives because ordinary lives mattered. Every smile, every farewell, every dream became part of something much greater. As you rest now, imagine standing one last time upon a peaceful castle wall. The morning air feels cool and fresh. Birds glide effortlessly across the bright sky. Below, rivers continue flowing exactly as they have for thousands of years. The world moves forward, yet the castles remain, patient, silent, steady, waiting for another sunrise, waiting for another storyteller, waiting for another quiet listener. Thank you for spending this peaceful journey through history. If this story helped you relax, perhaps another forgotten civilization, another ancient kingdom, or another remarkable chapter of the past will accompany you on a future evening. Until then, may your dreams be peaceful, may your sleep be deep, and may history always remind you that every generation leaves behind stories worth remembering. Good night, and thank you for listening.